deal. And it reminds me of Lucas Shaw's interview with David Ellison, in which he repeatedly expressed his main goal being to make good movies, that he and his sister Megan have grown up, on Hollywood and want to create content that's not sort of AI-driven sequel slop. Is it true that, the West Coast is more behind the Ellison deal? Because they do also want to fire a lot of people, right?
I thought you guys were going to ask me about the debt package, and we get to talk about the future of Hollywood instead. I mean, the way that a lot of the media industry analysts look at this is HBO Max has a ginormous library of content that nobody watches. So Netflix and Warner Brothers Discovery combining HBO Max with the Netflix algorithm would put into the real world, it would put in front of consumers a valuable library of content. Both companies, Netflix and Paramount Skydance, are actually arguing that they have the better outcome and bid from an antitrust perspective. Although clearly Netflix, from a sort of broad streaming standpoint, would take a bigger market share, which is what the president's talking about. Paramount Skydance, remember, that the main technical difference is that its bid is for the whole enchilada. All of Paramount, all of Warner Brothers Discovery, including the cable networks, while Netflix only wants the studios and streaming platform with the plan to spin off and divest the legacy cable assets. I'm not answering your question, which is what does Hollywood and the West Coast want? They, again, I think would look to Netflix, the algorithmic benefit of what the platform on Netflix offers, if it was combined with the studio and the existing library that Warner Brothers Discovery has. That is at least the answer that we've been getting on Bloomberg Tech from the media and entertainment specialists that we've had on.
Right, but I mean, movie theaters across the country, I think, rooting for Paramount, right? Because the idea that Netflix is going to let something play in the cinema is unlikely.
Because very quickly, Netflix's track record is to have a preference of releasing high caliber content on the platform first with very limited theatrical release. And in Lucas's detailed reporting through this saga, we aren't sure when in their proposal in the bid. And I'm sure that is a question that the watchdogs will ask over the course of time.
We could spend a lot more time talking about this, and I'm sure you will on Bloomberg Tech Kicks Off at 11 with Ed Ludlow and Caroline Hyde. From AI to infrastructure, stocks, cities, Scott Kroner shares some of his top picks for 2026. We're going to get to them next. This is Open Interest.
I'm David Weston. Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. We go on the road for a look at what lies behind the headlines of today and what will likely be the headlines tomorrow.
We need more transparency. Oil and gas is still important.
They said every citizen should be investing in the market.
Accelerate progress in all fields of science.
Watch Wall Street Week right here on Bloomberg.
More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Haslinda Amin in Bangkok. This is Bloomberg. Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Amin, only on Bloomberg.
The Middle East and Africa regions are home to some of the biggest deals and fastest growth in the world. Vibrant.
Hello, my name is DrPaulCottrell. We are live streaming on Rumble, on YouTube, and simulcasting on X Spaces. You can also watch both versions of the live stream on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Those versions are the larger screen that you're seeing on Rumble and the dashboard of the market telemetry on YouTube. So with that, please help support the work that I do by going to my website and getting the great products that I offer. All these videos are for free. It's through the donations and the support of purchasing the products and being paid members on different platforms that allows me to do these videos for free. All this content is for free. I don't put stuff behind a paywall. Please help support my work. You can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. You can also be a paid member to my Patreon and my Substack. You can also follow me on X, GETTR, TikTok, many different ways to follow my work. Please share the links and ask your social media to follow me. We're going to go over mostly the strategic plan that Trump just released, how it parlays in a larger geopolitical defense strategy within the Asian theater. Also, we're going to be going over the different markets. I'm going to give you some advice on where you can make some money in the market. Right now, the futures market for the S&P 500 is at 6,846. We're going to be opening up in the New York session for the cash positions within about 6 minutes or so. Thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Cleanse or the Max 35. Cleanse is 30 parts per million. Max 35 is 35 parts per million. They're at different price points, but you take them the same way. Teaspoon a day, swish it in your mouth, gargle, about 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then swallow. What this will do is improve your oral cavity, your oral pharynx, help with your epithelial lining, and maintain your mucosal barrier. This will boost up that immune system. This is something that you should be doing every day. If you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, what you want to do, especially during the cold season, is take a teaspoon or two a day. I've been doing this protocol for over 5 years, every day. And by doing this, and you stack it with some of the other products that I'm going to be talking about throughout this broadcast, you're going to be able to slow down the aging process and boost up your immune system. So go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Also, we're in the season of gift giving because of the holidays. Get some of the products and use them as gifts, or view it as it's turning a new page. It's at the end of the year, or there's a new year in 2026. I want you to get healthy. If you follow my advice, you will slow down the aging process and get healthier. So please go to my store and get the drops. These are made from structural nanosilver. Be prepared for the winter season. If you've been paying attention to the news, there's some things that are floating around. And get the lemon, the honey and lemon, the blueberry, or the cherry flavor. All right, get a few bags for your household. Very high quality, made from structural nanosilver. The moment you have that throat irritation, take them right away. If you're around someone that's not feeling well, take them prophylactically. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. I want you to save some money. In addition, if you buy $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. And if you've been paying attention to me and you get one of those anti-aging boxes or longevity boxes that I sell, you actually get further discount on top of the discount 5. Okay, with that, what I want to do is I want to play some of the details of this strategic strategy that was released. The strategic plan that was released here. All right. Okay. I want to play G0 first in their perspective.
Brother here, and a quick take to kick off your week. So much talk around the world, and appropriately so, around the new United States National Security Strategy document that outlines how the United States thinks about its role in the world. And it is pretty dramatically different. And it reflects, I think, the most important difference between the Trump administration and other administrations in foreign policy, which is on its traditional and closest allies, the Europeans. The transatlantic relationship and the security agreement in NATO does manifest the strongest alliance in the world heretofore. But President Trump, unlike Biden and unlike other previous presidents, believes that a strong Europe is not in U.S. interest, particularly a strong, coordinated Europe. He does not like the European Union. And it's not because he thinks the EU is a dictatorship, though you see some of that in terms of Elon Musk and other MAGA supporters that have made those arguments. Trump has no problem with dictators or with Democrats if they like him. His issue is that the EU together has the ability to tell Trump things that he doesn't like to hear. It's like pick on somebody your own size. Well, together the Europeans are the size of the United States, at least in terms of trade and regulatory capabilities. Now, Europe is mentioned twice as much as China in the documents, which is a little unusual on its face. The Russian government, the Kremlin, has come out publicly and said they're basically aligned with the Trump administration's national security strategy document, which should make you have reason to think that there might be some challenges with it. The issue here is that ultimately the Trump administration believes that exit from Europe, and certainly a weaker European Union, would be in American interest. Now, there are lots of members of European leadership that also believe that Europe has serious problems, that even some of whom believe that Europe faces some level of civilizational decay, as is written directly in the NSS. You certainly heard that from French President Macron. You've heard it from a number of German leaders, though not as strongly as Merz. The latest chancellor, you've heard it from the Italians. It has led to a change in policy on migration, where under Angela Merkel, when she was chancellor, they were just letting in enormous numbers of migrants, particularly Syrian migrants to Germany, who were not well integrated, many of whom were not particularly welcome, and a lot of whom were not willing to integrate into a German sense of nationality and belongingness. And as a consequence, you see much stronger migrant tough policies on migration from across the EU and from Ursula von der Leyen and her party, which hails to the center right. Having said that, these policies are made and they're meant to make Europe stronger, not weaker. They are meant to be about more competitiveness, like the Draghi plan. They're meant to reduce a level of over-bureaucratization and red tape, which historically had been thought of as the European superpower, but is preventing them from economic growth and productivity. It's chilling entrepreneurship, and it means that they don't have the kind of R&D investment or technology platforms that the Americans have developed, and the Chinese, by the way, have developed. So there is a recognition that there's a problem, but the European belief in that solution is that Europe, and therefore the EU, should be stronger. And indeed, so many of the Eurosceptic parties inside Europe have themselves given up on the idea of Brexit for themselves. I mean, the National Rally in France, which used to be the National Front, has rejected the idea of Frexit because it's extremely unpopular in France, and instead wants more sovereignty, but also certainly wants to still be a component of a strong European Union. Indeed, a strong European Union is one of the few most popular policies that Europeans across the board agree on, in part because Brexit was seen to be such an onerous and burdensome disaster, not least by the Brits themselves, most of whom believe that it was a mistake and they would undo it if they could. So that is the real takeaway here. The fact that the Europeans have been willing and capable to really act on Ukraine, where they see the Russians as an existential threat to their own security. So if the United States isn't going to spend as much money, in fact, now the U.S. is spending almost no U.S. taxpayer money on Ukraine, the Europeans are paying for almost all of it. And that gives them influence, gives them veto power on what the outcomes will be, no matter what Trump happens to say when he meets with Zelensky or when he talks with Putin on the phone. That has mattered for the Europeans, but the Europeans have not yet seen the United States as a principal threat or principal adversary. That is changing. There was some of that with J.D. Vance when he spoke at the Munich Security Conference last February. There's a lot more of it when his statements towards Europe reflect the actual policy of the U.S. in the NSS. And I think that a big part of that is that Rubio's not doing the principal drafting. He's trusted, but he's like on Venezuela, he's on Ukraine, he's driving the policies. J.D. Vance and Stephen Miller, who runs a lot of what used to be the National Security Advisor, much closer to Trump and closer and more trusted by Trump, those are the principal people drafting, those are the principal people driving strategy, how the Europeans respond and to what extent they see themselves as in an adversarial position with the United States. And that requires existential decisions by them with urgency, where they have moved on Ukraine. That'll be something very, very critical to follow in the next months, particularly as we get closer to next year, next February's Munich Security Conference, which I'll be at and watching very, very closely. That's it for me. I'll talk to you all.
What you're going to notice with some of these videos is that they're going to demonize Trump's strategy because it's pivoting away from Europe and focusing more in our hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, and also the strategic positioning in Asia. Now, if you take it just by face value of the wording, you would think that it's more capitulating to China. But I think you need to pay attention to the first pieces that are being moved on the chessboard here. Venezuela is a key first move for the United States. We need to secure that region, make sure that we have full dominant control of the Panama Canal, and that we have access to rare earth materials. And then we're selling arms to our allies in the Pacific theater. That's South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand, the Philippines, right? India is also part of this strategic alliance. And as they build up and prepare, then the United States will start moving forward. Now, I think that the strategic plan from the United States side is try to prevent China from invading Taiwan during the Trump administration. Trump's administration ends January 20th or so of 2029. All right? And that I think that the next president will take this even further, and it's probably that president that's going to be a kinetic war with China, not Trump. I have my reservations on this. I think that Trump should be the one that does it, but Trump's probably going to chicken out on this. But this is a strategic move that's going to be multiple year to actually defend the 9-dash line. Because you have to remember that if China takes Taiwan, freedom of navigation for our allies and for ourselves will be circumvented. Okay, so let's listen in to some of the other critiques of this strategy. All right.
So, do I get to eat them now?
Get back to it. It's not going anywhere. And I need to talk about the new national security strategy and perhaps this Monroe Doctrine. I mean, after all, like I've called this YouTube channel Pax Americana, which suggests I do have an interest in the American empire. I am pro-American empire. But that doesn't necessarily mean I'm for or against any particular thing. I despise jingoism, I don't like chauvinism. And, you know, as I said in an early video, for me, the first law, Shirkin's first law of strategy is don't do stupid stuff. So they're doing stupid things in the name of rah, flag waving. That's not what I'm into at all. I just want to talk about the national security strategy because I have noticed on social media that a lot of the so-called foreign policy elites, of which I guess I must say I am a member, have been dogpiling on top of it, saying this is the worst thing ever. There's been a lot of gnashing of teeth and clutching of pearls, and oh my God, you know, the sky is falling. And anytime I see that happen, where the mob dogpiles on something, and you see these people going on about how the sky is falling, my inclination is actually just to sort of step back and run the other direction, or maybe say, like, hold on, guys, like, is the sky really falling? Should we really be dogpiling onto this? Or maybe we need to be a little bit more thoughtful before we make a decision. So I want to be open-minded about the national security strategy. So what I did is I took the time to read it, which is why I didn't immediately respond the way it seems like everybody else did. I took that time to read it, to reflect. And there are some things I like about it, some things I don't like about it, some things I think are downright weird or possibly even scary. There's good stuff, bad stuff, and ugly, which is hence the title of this video. So what I want to do in this video is I want to go over these things and talk about what's good, what's bad, what's ugly. My name is Michael Shirkin, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Pax Americana, a conversation about world affairs, global conflict, military strategy, and anything else that happens to be on my mind. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe. It's extremely helpful. And if you feel so inspired, feel free to throw some money.
Make sure you subscribe to my channel. It's for free. And also go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the products that will help with your health. The structural nano silver soaps will help with the health of your skin. Very high quality. You can get it in peppermint, lavender, also in charcoal tea tree and lemongrass. So go to my store, get the structural nano silver soaps, get a few bars for your household. You can use them as gifts too. This is perfect. Make sure you use discount 5, you get $5 off. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. And if you get one of those anti-aging boxes or longevity boxes, you'll save even more money.
Way, either by using the thanks button here on YouTube, or you can also buy me a coffee using the link that I put in the description below. Also, you can sign up to become a member, which would make you among the coolest people on earth, which is a really great thing to aspire to become, right? Am I right? So, all right, so let's get on to it. Part 1, the good. Now, by good, I wish to include both things that I think are good and endorse, and things that I think, well, it's reasonable. I can't discount out of hand and welcome the debate. Like, this is interesting. I might not have gone with this choice, but okay, let's talk about it. Let's have a debate about it because this is really interesting. So the very biggest example of this, and perhaps the most interesting and distinguishing feature of the national security strategy, good or bad, depending, I want to have debate, is its shift, its pivot towards not the Indo-Pacific, but the Western Hemisphere. It's interesting. Previous documents have all talked about the pivot to the Indo-Pacific. It's gone now. Now it's all about the Western Hemisphere, hence Trump's rhetoric about the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. Now, the Monroe Doctrine, for those of you who might not be familiar with it, particularly I guess if you're not part of my American audience, and a lot of you are not American, Monroe Doctrine is something that President James Monroe came up with in 1823, in which he basically said...
Let me just interject here. I think what's happening is that China's going to be belligerent. It's going to continue to escalate in the region by doing these war games in the air and in the sea. All right? That's going to create strife, worry with our allies. They're going to go and start buying weapons from the United States. This is going to be for a few years. And when that happens, there's going to be further tension between the Allied forces and China. And as we have secured the Western Hemisphere during the Trump administration, it sets in motion for us to fully be prepared for a war with China. Because you got to remember, we need some time to build our ships. We're having a little problem with that. And I've done multiple videos, and a great source of information on that is Naval Institute. So this is a multi-year, multi-step strategy, a stepwise strategy to actually have a war with China. That's my take on it. It's not what is said, is what are we doing? If we really want to de-escalate with China, why would we be sending weapons and selling weapons to our allied forces in the Pacific? Why are we decoupling our manufacturing? Do you think it's just to build up our economic clustering? No, it's to reduce our exposure when we do have a war with China. It's reducing our exposure economically. But it's because this is so entangled, we need multiple years to untangle this for our benefit. It's a multi-year strategy.
More European mucking about in the Western Hemisphere, and from now on, the United States is going to be the top dog, the hegemon of the Western Hemisphere. The Monroe Doctrine was always a weird thing. It always seemed kind of crazy and radically premature for the United States to be issuing. Because in 1823, the United States had no military power to speak of, and had very few interests beyond our own borders, and just simply wasn't in a position to be doing anything about the Western Hemisphere, doing anything about any European powers, anybody else for that matter, who wanted to buck about in the Western Hemisphere. The United States was very solidly focused on conquering and settling our own continent. And we had just enough military power to enable that, using the army to fight Indians. But that's it. Like, we had nothing else. We had no navy to speak of, no standing army. And in reality, on the ground, concretely, what the Monroe Doctrine amounted to was actually an endorsement of the Pax Britannica. Because back in those days, the British Empire was the dominant force in the Western Hemisphere. It was mucking about ceaselessly in South America and Central America and doing all sorts of things. And there wasn't a damn thing the United States could do about it, even if we wanted to. And the reality is that most of what the British were doing served American interests as well. By and large, American interests and British interests in the Western Hemisphere aligned. This is a great and wonderful thing for the United States. Why? Well, because it meant that the British could do all the heavy lifting. We didn't have to do any of it. It also meant that we didn't have to worry about the British. And just think about this, how awesome that was for the United States, that we could focus for so long on conquering and developing our own economy, our own continent, our own resources, without having to fret about defense, without having to defend the border with Canada. I mean, imagine the expense of that if we had to build fortifications, we would have had a large standing army. Imagine if we had had to have a navy large enough to take on or dissuade the British, that kind of thing. Like, crazy. We didn't have to do any of that, and that's a really wonderful thing. Yay, us. But that's why it's so weird, because we can do anything. To my knowledge, I'm not a U.S. foreign policy, 19th century U.S. foreign policy expert, but I'm under the impression that the only time the United States was ever in a position to throw its weight around in the Western Hemisphere against the interests of the European power was when President Lincoln in the 1860s helped encourage the French to leave Mexico, because I believe he sent the French, who Napoleon III was mucking about. There was an empire in Mexico and doing all sorts of crazy things. The Lincoln sent a message saying, get the hell out. And at the time, because it's the height of the Civil War, the United States had this gigantic military power and could have taken on France. And the French got the message, and this encouraged them to leave. I don't know if it's necessarily, they're also defeated on the ground, but.
What's another thing that's really important to pay attention to is that you had these countries that were trying to colonialize, all right, and spread their empire, get resources, right? And they were competing with each other, France and England and Spain, right? But as they were starting to have internal strife in the country and strife amongst each other within the European theater, they had to withdraw. All right. And there was, as Napoleon was moving through Europe, and then eventually he loses, right? You know, as he tries to fight Russia. That's a moment in time where France no longer really could be an empire. And so places like the United States, places like South America, places like Mexico, it set up in motion that these empires that were built up started to decline, and local regions were able to consolidate. So this is the Monroe Doctrine, that where local regions are consolidating, and that these empires, England, France, Spain, were in decline as they were moving closer and closer towards World War I. All right? Now, history rhymes. It doesn't repeat. All right? So the United States is realizing that, well, wait a minute here, there's going to be a war in Asia. It's probably better to actually we fund it. We send weapons, we sell weapons, just like we were selling weapons in World War I and World War II, right? Before we really became engaged in the war. Let them fight it out in Asia. And then we come in as a secondary force, a second wave, where we've built up, we've made money in the sale of the arms, and we are more reserved in our energy to be able to produce force against China. So I see this as almost like there's a declining of the empire. There's a declining of empires, just like it was happening in the 1800s. Declining of empires, the European empires. And then there's local consolidation that led to conflict in these local regions, especially in Europe, but also in Asia, that led to World War I and World War II. Now the question is will there be something similar with the conflict that was in Europe in World War I that will happen between the North America and South America? Will we have our version of this internal conflict within our hemisphere? I think the military prowess of the United States and capability far exceeds anything that's in South America. So there is definitely asymmetry. But you're talking about regions that, a lot of it's jungle, but there's a lot of resources. I would think that the United States would have a higher odds of winning if there was some sort of North America, South America war that takes place. All right, let's continue. Those are some of the thoughts that popped in my mind when he was talking.
I think the French are like, maybe we should double down here. Let's go. But then we got rid of that military power, and it's not until the end of the 19th century, with the Spanish War in 1898, that the Americans really had the interest and the wherewithal in throwing a weight around in the Western Hemisphere. At least that's the way I see it. Up until that time, we just were too weak and, frankly, busy doing other things like settling our own continent, which is great. So why did Monroe do the doctrine? I don't really know. I don't know enough about the politics, domestic politics in the 1820s. Maybe somebody in the comment below can explain to me why Monroe did this, but either way, that's the doctrine. Okay, so what Trump is offering is a renewed focus on the Monroe doctrine. That's not what I would have gone with, but I can't say categorically that it's bad. It's interesting. It's
right, let me just interject. Before the strategic plan was issued, I would have thought that a full pivot to Asia was the better policy. But knowing that our military is not prepared for a full-fledged war with China. Also, the simulations show that there's a high probability that the United States loses when it tries to defend Taiwan. Or if we do win, it's catastrophic for our military and for our economy. So what did we do in World War I and World War II? Let our allies fight the war, wear down the enemy, and then we come in to clean up. And oh, by the way, we make a ton of money selling the arms. And we're cleaning up our backyard, aka South America. That probably is a better policy.
And it also kind of makes sense in some regards. For example, if you think about the sorts of issues that affect Americans in their day-to-day lives, what affects us? And often world affairs, the things that go on are sort of, the things that are at stake are abstract and don't necessarily affect us. But if you think about what affects us day to day, as I go out and about and wander around the neighborhood, it's two things. Well, migration is the first thing. The second thing is, although that doesn't affect me, but it does affect many, many people in the larger community, is drugs, like the narcotics problem, the opioid epidemic. These are real things. These are things that come out of the Western Hemisphere. These are Western Hemisphere issues. This doesn't have anything really to do with China or Europe or Russia or great power competition, anything like that. This just has to do with problems that are kind of indigenous to the world below our border with Mexico. So if you're trying to craft a strategy or a foreign policy that really answers to the concrete reality of your average American, why not, right? The Monroe Doctrine kind of makes some sense. Like this makes sense in terms of what are our interests, but these are our interests, and these are our primary interests. And there's this whole statement in the Trump's national security strategy about what our interests are, what are our vital interests, and it's really hard to argue with them because they're about, like, you know, our health, our safety. We don't want people messing with us. We want to do something about the narcotics thing. You know, it's all sort of real stuff. And then if you're trying to deal with the world of the real rather than the theoretical, then you can see that the Western Hemisphere maybe requires more attention. The other thing that I think that the Trump national security strategy rightly says is it talks about how the American foreign policy establishment for decades, well, since forever, has judged that migration and drugs have been manageable problems and relatively inconsequential, such that we can focus our attentions on other global problems. Trump is basically saying, not so fast, these are consequential, and guess what? We've done a terrible job of managing these things up until this point, and it's hard to argue against that. Now, we might have differences about migration policy and immigration policy, etc., but it is a mess, right? And narcotics is a serious problem. Again, also with narcotics, there are also things that can be said about narcotics and what's the best thing to do about it. For reasons I can't possibly explain, I've been sort of obsessed with these YouTube channels that do interviews with fentanyl addicts on the streets of Kensington, Philadelphia. And the interviews are, I mean, it's often brutal stuff. But among the things that these interviews demonstrate very clearly is that these addicts have lots and lots of problems. And simply cutting off the supply of a certain kind of drug doesn't necessarily going to solve any of their problems. Chances are they're just going to move on to some other drug. And getting them off the streets and helping them deal with their
Another thing that's important to understand about the strategy is that put it in the context of the Jewish lobbying group. The Jewish lobbying group is going to want the Trump administration to be focused in the Middle East, right? And also the effects of the Middle East on Europe. But if Trump focuses more on North America, South America, Central America, and strategically selling weapons in the Asian theater and coordinating with our allies, and decoupling from China, the Jewish lobbying group doesn't have that much of a claw on the Trump administration. And so Israel will start to decline in relevance with its lobbying group. Now they're going to try to create strife. They're going to the Jewish lobbying group is going to try to talk to senators and representatives and say that this policy is bad and that there needs to be more attention to Ukraine and the Middle East and all this. I think those individuals, many, not all, many of them they're saying this because they're aligned with the lobbying group by Israel. Now, I personally think that there's too much meddling of Israel in our politics. I think that there is way too much reliance on our electoral process through PAC money, through lobbying groups that are affiliated with the Israelis. Now, you know, some people would agree with me, some people would disagree with me, but I think there is a serious problem that is starting to emerge. Not even just starting to emerge. It's not emerging. It's been around for a while. And if we don't stop this, we may be in forever wars like what happened for 20 years after 9/11 in the Middle East. That didn't help us. And is Israel really on our, in our benefit? Now, I'm not trying to say that we need to be isolationists or anything like that. I think we need to be mindful of what's going on in the Middle East, but in terms of our economic survival, in terms of our long-term next 250 years, us focusing on Asia in our hemisphere, are very important. It's not just our hemisphere. Our hemisphere is the first stage to a war with China. Now, I have my reasons why I think we need to have a war with China. But the thing is that Israel's lobbying, I think, they're going to try to demonize Trump and this new strategic vision or resurrection, because it's very close to the Monroe Doctrine. It's really the Monroe Doctrine with a disdain for China. Let's put it that way. So keep that in mind. We're going to see a lot of people that are going to be demonizing it. And then you ask the question, why are you demonizing it? And I'm willing to bet there's 1 degree of separation to someone in the lobbying sphere by Israel. Now, there was a news article, I believe it was The Guardian, that came out. So we have military staff trying to maintain the peace within Gaza. And so our military is working with the Israeli military for this Gaza plan, peace plan. Supposedly, what has been happening is the Israelis that are part of that group that are working together, they were recording conversations and planning of our servicemen that are in our planners. And the general, I don't know his name, stated to the representatives from Israel to stop it. Now, Israel declines. When asked questions, our military is not willing to divulge any more information. But the point here is that Israel's playing games. And as they continue to play games, they're going to lose support by the American public. All right, let's continue with this.
It's going to require treatment programs that are of a scale and of a quality that simply don't exist these days. Okay, so there's this whole debate about treatment versus enforcement, all this sort of stuff. That's way beyond my expertise. I don't want to get into this in this video. But let me just say that at a very basic level, I would agree with the Trump administration that drugs and narcotics is a serious problem. What to do about it, we can debate, but it is a serious problem.
All right, U.S. October layoffs rate 1.2%.
One thing with migration, what do you do about that? We can debate, but it's a real thing. Immigration affects all of us. Every time I go out into the street or go to a gas station, 7-Eleven, I'm dealing with immigrants all the time. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Most of the time I find, the vast majority of the time, I find that my interactions with these immigrants is perfectly pleasant and fine and positive, and I'm okay with it. But it's a thing. It's a real thing that I can't pretend is of no consequence to my life. So Trump, I think, is kind of hitting the right note there. More things that I want to put in the good column. The national security strategy calls for downplaying the importance of the Middle East in American policy. Basically, the idea is that because we are less dependent on energy, on the oil and gas that comes out of the Middle East, we should care less about what goes on and get less involved. And this is also a reason for doing more to reduce our dependence on Middle Eastern energy. The less dependent we are on energy from the Middle East, the less we need to care about what happens there, and the less involved we have to be in what happens in that part of the world.
And this is a point that I'm making about the Israeli lobbying group. If we decouple from the reliance of energy by the Middle East, especially Saudi Arabia, and we are more aligned with rare earths in our hemisphere, especially in South America, and dominating the energy sector, not just in the United States, but also in South America, then we are much better positioned if we have to go to war with China, post-Trump. And we won't care too much about Israel. And the thing is that Israel has been doing this to themselves by over-lobbying. There is such a thing as over-lobbying. And if you've been paying attention to what's been going on in the news the last 6 months, there is a big push that's really anti-Netanyahu, all right? You can take it even further, anti-Zionism. But the thing is that Israel has gone too far in trying to control our politics. And as we decouple from the Middle East, the importance of Netanyahu starts to dwindle.
I hardly endorse these ideas. I mean, when you look at the way the desire to keep cheap oil coming out of the Middle East and out of the Persian Gulf has so distorted American foreign policy for the last, well, I guess ever since World War II. I mean, it's really appalling in the way it's distorted and formed our relations with the Gulf states and these kingdoms and the Iraq war is like, come on. I mean, I endorse this. I think this is great. And if it does mean doing more energy production in the United States, yeah, I don't have a problem with that either. So I'm going to put this under the good category. I would also add that in general, I like the emphasis that the national security strategy places on promoting American interests and looking after ourselves and our own interests before other people's interests. And I think that it's true that previous administrations, ever since World War II, have been remarkably overly indulgent of countries and multinational organizations, many of which we created, of their actions that are against American interests, that they do things that are against their interests, that these organizations have done things that are against their interests. And we kind of put up with this side of the sense of noblesse, or the sense of like, oh, we don't, doesn't really matter. Look at the United Nations, which we created. we created the United Nations. It exists because of the United States, and often it does things that are contrary to American interests. Now, the reason why we did this in the immediate aftermath of World War II is it's really very noble, because what the United States did at the height of its economic and military power, the immediate aftermath of World War II, is basically said, we agree to cede some of our power and some of our sovereignty to these multinational institutions because it's in the interest of the whole. This is for the greater good. It's remarkably noble, and I think it's something that distinguishes the American empire from its predecessors, the Pax Americana from some of the previous empires. The fact that we could have taken a very different approach in 1945, 1946, because we had all the power and all the money. We did it out of sense of right and wrong, ability. This is great. But that being said, you could also argue that there are lines that maybe people go too far. Are we allowing institutions or different countries to go too far? And Trump is signaling, let's not do that anymore. And I can't disagree with that. What that might look like in detail, that's another issue, but as a general principle, I can't disagree with that. I select the national security strategy's emphasis on the American worker and on American jobs. I agree with its criticism. There's a criticism in the NSS about how previous administrations have encouraged the industrialization of the United States, have worked with, run with this theory that by enriching China, that would be in our interests, and I think that notion has been proven false and is in fact boomeranged against us. I think that the way the American elites, and I hate to use that word, I'm going to talk about that in this video, there is this consensus in the United States that free trade is good, but the consensus, it feels more like a religious dogma to me than anything else. And maybe it's because I read too much Marx, right? The way Marx talks about free trade is that it just furthers the commodification of labor, but it also, it starts with the assumption that what's good for the whole is what's really good for the capital, for the rich people who can invest in the stock market, and you can benefit. So if you offshore a factory, this is good for the stocks of the company, right? The people invest in it, but not necessarily the people who work for the company, that kind of thing, right? Is it in our interest? It's like we invited China to eat our lunch and then steal the recipe for our lunch and then buy the restaurant in which we're eating. This is a real problem. Does it really serve our interests? And I don't know. I think
this is the reason why I've been talking about economic clustering. We need to bring back our manufacturing because that's where real innovation happens. You don't innovate by just designing. You don't innovate by having someone else make it for you. You innovate by actually making it. All right? And then you improve. And there are new things that happen that are tangential. New discoveries of the design or the manufacturing of a new product or differentiation or whatever. We have to build up our own economic clustering. And then you'll have secondary and tertiary businesses that are tied to that economic cluster. That's great. And what that will do is boost up our GDP, and our debt to GDP ratio will improve, which is super important. So building up our economic clustering and reversing the hyper-globalization that took place in the 90s all the way to the present time to make us more economically viable is prudent. Now, what that means is that more people will be hired that are American. More stuff will be created. More other jobs will be created. And people will actually be able to form families and have this, quote, American dream. In addition, new businesses will be created. You think new businesses will be created if you ship jobs overseas? No, of course not. But new jobs and more people will be hired if we continue on building up our own economy and not shipping the jobs away. Now, that doesn't mean that all jobs are going to be in the United States, that everything is going to be made in the United States. No, it won't. But the thing is that more should be made here. We need to reverse the policies of NAFTA, and we need to reverse the policies of the trade that really went into hyperdrive at in 1999 and 2000 with China because of Walmart and other companies. You know, it was GE that was trying to figure out ways to save money and help their share price by shipping manufacturing overseas. Not just Walmart.
And offshoring is the fact that we have effectively offshored our industrial pollution. As a result, the waterways and the air of the United States is about cleaner than it's been in a very, very long time because all the pollution is somewhere else, like in China. So, yes. Well, that being said, the rhetoric in favor of the American worker that you see in sort of Trump documents, Trumpist documents like the national security strategy, often is not matched by reality. And this is a part of the problem with Trump administration, but really all administrations, is that yes, but what about, right? So we're going to put the interest in the American workers first. Great. But then when you look at details, you think, like, is that true? Is that what's really, really, really going on? So, for example, tariffs hurt the American workers because tariffs make everything expensive. Tariffs, in theory, are going to help create jobs in the United States. Is that true? Has it actually happened? And have the benefits outweigh the costs? It's really hard to say. I don't really know. Also, I believe if you're serious about reindustrialization, that's going to require certain things that I don't see being done, certain kinds of like investment policies, industrial policies, things to encourage investment, encourage the retraining, encourage the professional education. There's so many things that you have to do to make it possible for, let's say, if Apple really wanted to make iPhones in the United States. It's easier said than done. They don't have the industrial engineers. They don't have the ability. Never mind the
This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You know how many industrial engineers we're actually producing in the United States? Actually, quite a lot. All you got to do is take a look at an art school or a tech school. Find out how many are going into product design or industrial design and how many they're produced. There's thousands. Engineers, thousands. There are engineers that are being produced that can't find a job right now. He's wrong. I know he's wrong. I worked in this industry in automotive. I know the whole game and what happened. Pre-NAFTA, during NAFTA, post-NAFTA. I've seen it all. All right? He's wrong. Just go to Grok and ask. Let's do a real live, all right, question with Grok. Hey, I love Grok. Grok is great. All right, how many USA graduates in industrial design? Now that's just industrial design, okay? So basically they do CAD, they do product development, all right? But then you also have manufacturing engineers too that will be needed, and there's lots of them. Think about all the plants that we have in automotive. We still make a lot of cars, and all those lines need manufacturing engineers. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. How many U.S. graduates in industrial design on average per year? Okay, let's see. What does Grok say? It's thinking. Approximately 1,700 USA graduates in industrial design per year. That's a lot. You can do a lot with that. That's per year. All right. Now, what about manufacturing? What about USA graduates in manufacturing engineering on average per year? Thinking. All right, about 1,950 U.S. graduates in manufacturing engineering per year, according to NC NCES, which is National Center of Education Statistics. It's also stating that so there's a little bit, I'm a little bit surprised that it's below 1,000. I was figuring about the same as industrial designers. So we need to up our game on the manufacturing engineering side. But all that is like saying, hey, students, you get a discount on your tuition. You know how fast manufacturing engineering will happen? Now, there's less people going into manufacturing engineering because everyone for the last 35 years has been here, and then it's been going to China. But there's a lot of manufacturing engineers in the United States because of automotive. So let's dive in a little bit. How many manufacturing engineers in USA? $150,000. We got the base to do this.
The parts. It's just a question of, do you really have people who are capable of doing this kind of work? To get it, you can't just put tariffs on the Chinese-made stuff. You also have to help.
No, this is a thing. This is a paper-pushing think tanker that never designed or manufactured anything. I can tell right now. We have the base. Build the business. They will come. You will be able to find people to work in it. And so what we've been told by CNBC and Bloomberg and the talking shows is that Americans can't build an iPhone. And then when we find out that, well, Apple's going to be bringing back manufacturing, then we're told Americans don't want to put screws in a device, not realizing that almost most of the iPhone is using robotics, and you have to program the robot. So that's CAD/CAM. You have to design the line. That's manufacturing engineering. And these different stations, that's all CAD'd out. And then you have to build it. You have to make the parts and build the assembly line. There's a lot of money doing that. And then there's the statistics and the quality control of knowing what part should be put with another part. Do you think that the glass on the phone and the housing of the phone are just random? No. You have computer vision that's measuring the actual glass top and measuring through computer vision the housing. And it knows within tenths, if not hundredths of an inch, what the best fit would be within what lot. And the computer will pick what lens will fit the best with what housing. It's not random. Do you think a human being's doing that? No, it's computer vision. Have you looked at an iPhone? Where's the damn screw? It's heavily automated. Heavily automated. What you need is a human being to design the line. What you need is human beings watching the line. You need human beings doing the quality control. You need human beings to make the tools and build the assembly line. See, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Nourish available labor that can do this kind of work, etc. So it's an incomplete policy, and it's often an incoherent policy, even if in principle I endorse the intent.
It's incoherent to him because he's never built anything. It's incoherent for him because how many times has he actually walked a line? How many times has he actually looked at a manufacturing line in the United States? Does he know CAD? Does he even understand the major advances in CAD technology? Especially with AI generation? Beware of the think tanker. He doesn't even, it's incoherent because he doesn't understand the technology.
Strategy. Also in the good column, they have to be careful here. The national security strategy calls for pragmatism, being pragmatic, but not making it an ideology of it. Also being realistic, but not falling prey to realism. Realism is something that I'm always suspicious of. Frankly, I'm suspicious of anything that comes out of international relations scholarship. I generally have a lot of disdain for the entire field. I mean, one of the things I notice about realism.
Now he's starting to align with what I'm saying. The think tanker doesn't understand on how to grow economies. They don't get it because they haven't done it. They haven't, the United States is about building. Our whole ethos is moving forward, being adventurous, what's at the horizon, and building. We are builders, not think tankers and paper pushers. But what we've had for the last 35 years is a bunch of fucking lawyers pushing paper, telling us what we can't do and what we should do.
If you lined up every realist international relations scholar end to end, you'll never reach a consensus about what it actually means. And constantly they're defining it because they always discover that their definition doesn't actually work well. You have to understand it's really this, it's really whatever. It's kind of silly. But there's this idea that you see in the
same thing that he's whining about with the think tankers is what I'm whining about him when it comes to manufacturing, technology, and industrial design. We have a lot of people in the United States that would love to have a larger economy within the industrial design and manufacturing industries. We're primed for this. And then when it starts to grow more, which it is, more people will go into those fields. If you have someone that is young, that's trying to figure out what they want to do with their life, what you should have them do, male or female, don't go into law, don't go into medicine, go into engineering, go into industrial design. Now, some people, they're not that artistic, or, they don't know, they don't draw well or whatever. But get them involved in something that is engineering or in design or in CAD. They will make more money than your average doctor.
Isms, ideologies, and just trying to be pragmatic and trying to have a common sense approach to things. There's also a sense of not wanting to have values and idealism take the fore in guiding our foreign policy, so we shouldn't be hectoring other countries about how they live their lives and how they govern themselves. But also we can't renounce values, and this is where the NSS tries to say there's a balance to be drawn, and it's not calling for the renunciation of values and ideals, just for rebalancing. And I guess I agree with that, but I'm really worried because I think it's a slippery slope. It's too easy. It's easy to go from saying, all right, it's unrealistic, it's not helpful for idealism to guide our foreign policy, to slip into the sort of cynical, we have no values. Right, there are no good people or bad people. There's just business. It's all just sort of interest, and then you can kind of become cynical, and then you can go too far. So, but in and of itself, this idea of rebalancing is not something that I disagree with, particularly because I do find that that values-based idealism, idealistic approaches to foreign policy are just not realistic, and I don't think to get as far, although they might be very satisfying, perhaps for the proponents, because we can feel good about ourselves because we're engaged in the right kind of virtual signaling, even if we're not actually affecting any improvement on the ground.
Well, I think what it is it's the difference between romanticism and pragmatism. We need to be pragmatic.
a corollary to
No, wait, I missed it. I can't rewind it. What I was going to show was a little bit of the industrial design and manufacturing of those espresso makers. But, all right. Unfortunately, I can't do that.
National security strategies embrace or re-embrace of the Monroe Doctrine is the administration's abandonment of the paradigm of great power competition. Now, maybe this is something I could put in a good column and say, it's like, I don't necessarily agree with it, but it's interesting, and we should debate about it. But I think it's more bad than good, so I'm going to put it here in the bad column. I do think that we need to debate whether or not the great power competition paradigm is a useful one, it's a healthy one. I think that needs to be said. I think one of the problems with the great power competition paradigm is that it can blind us to things that are really important, or blind us to things that perhaps are more important than the great power competition. It reminds me of the Cold War. During the Cold War, we suffered from a monomania. We were so obsessed with the Soviet Union that this made us blind to things that were going on all over the place that we either dismissed as unimportant or we just didn't even see it all. And it led us to do things like cozy up with people who we shouldn't have cozied up to, just because they made sense. Doing so made sense in terms of our campaign against the Soviet Union. I'm thinking of like the Soviet Mujahideen or Pakistan during that era, right? We helped cultivate groups that eventually became Al-Qaeda because these people were enemies of the Soviets. Were they our friends? Hardly. Does this come back to haunt us? Absolutely. But for the most part, in the Cold War, that's all we could see. It was just, are they good or bad, with good or bad being defined by where they stood vis-a-vis us and the Soviet Union. That's very problematic. Global power competition, even though we've expanded from us versus the Soviets, is a little bit broader than that, but it still is a similar problem. Like if we look at Africa, for example, and all we see is great power competition, we only see Africa through the lens of great power competition. The likelihood is much greater if we become blinded to things that are really important. And also it means we're not seeing Africa for themselves, or Africa qua Africa, Africans on their own, in their own basis. They're just sort of theater of a war between us and China or something like that. And I can't see how that's a constructive thing to do. So, okay.
Africans have more than 1 million years to get their shit together. Have they? No. And then that you'll have the people that are coming from the Ivy League, they're saying, well, that's because of colonialism. Really? Really? Or is it because of ethics? I think you can judge a lot on a society based on its ethical core.
Not all bad, not in principle bad. But when you look at the way it's expressed in the national security strategy, it's expressed in two ways. First of all, China is acknowledged, but the threat of China, the way it talks about China, is markedly different from the way you would see it in other documents, where China is no longer the pacing threat or a great rival. It's just sort of like it's an economic competitor. It's much more a competitor. And we need to be worried about this because we need to make sure that the Chinese can't cut off our access to the South China Sea or take over or diminish our access to strategic minerals and to our supply chains that we need for our industry. But there's not that much talk about China in this whole thing. It's really interesting. It gets worse, though, when it talks about Russia, because the national security strategy basically dismisses Russia as a serious threat in any way, shape, or form. And it goes further than that. The national security strategy makes clear that the threat in Europe is not Russia. No. The threat is the European Union. The European Union is the threat because the European Union is undermining the viability and the confidence of the European sovereign nation states, and is making the Europeans weak, making them lose confidence. And according to the national security strategy, the problem isn't, again, it's not Russia. It's not that Russia invaded Ukraine, is trying to destroy Ukraine. or is trying to have this revision, is trying to rebuild the Russian Empire or anything like that. No. The problem is that Europeans, because they perceive themselves as weak, are freaked out about the Russian threat. And that's the real danger here. It's not Russia, it's the Europeans and their overreaction to the Russian threat. According to the national security strategy, what the Europeans need to do is get a grip, calm down, be more confident about their own strength, and thus they would no longer freak out about the Russians, they would no longer fret, and everything would be fine, because that means that the risk of a conflict with Russia would be much reduced. And then our relationship collectively with Russia would stabilize. So the objective here is stabilizing the relationship with Russia. It's not Russia that's threatening the stability of the power dynamics. It's the Europeans, because of lack of confidence, that are threatening the instability of the security system. Totally bizarre. Now, there's a little bit of truth in this, in the sense that, yeah, the Europeans are really insecure, and I guess this is a result of their 80-year dependency on the United States for their own security. The reality is that Europeans, especially collectively, have the economic and military might to throw Russia around like a rag doll. They could totally take on Russia, no problem. They have enough tanks, enough planes, etc. They have the industry. It's not a problem. But they feel insecure in part because they're not acting together. They haven't, it's like they waste a lot of effort, they waste a lot of money. So there's some truth to this, but also it seems to me that the answer isn't weakening, let's say, the European Union in favor of these independent nations, sovereign states. It's rather strengthening the European Union, because it's only collectively that European countries have the power to deal with Russia and to shrug off the Russians, not individually as separate states. The whole thing about the European Union is really part of some very strange kind of rhetoric and ideology that you find in the national security strategy that is hostile towards what I'm going to call liberal culture. And now this brings us to the ugly, part 3. In the national security strategy, there are things that I think are at very best weird and often quite ugly, and things that are ugly because what I hear are echoes of illiberal far-right politics and the fascist regimes in the mid-20th century. What am I talking about? For one thing, the national security strategy frequently evokes the specter of elites with their globalist agenda. All right. There's always some truth to that, right? Because you can talk about like the foreign policy blog in the United States and the elites, people like me with a fistful of Yale degrees and my Brooks Brother jacket and
look, Brooks Brother jacket, multiple degrees from Yale, and wait a minute, and he's telling you that Americans can't make stuff? This is the problem that we have in America. The intelligentsia. You see, there's a special place in hell for these people, all right? The 9th level of Dante's Inferno is dedicated for private equity firms. The level right before that, level 8, for Dante's Inferno, for hell, those are for the lawyers. Now, if you're a lawyer and a private equity guy, there's a special place that's not even mentioned in Dante's Inferno. That's level 10, where you're permanently in hell. But people like this, it's a problem. Because they're giving advice and they don't know what they're talking about because they weren't on the ground. They don't get it. Do you take advice from a general that never fought in a war? Do you take advice from a general that never was a soldier? Of course not.
Many of us have sort of a consensus about certain kinds of things, right? And maybe we're out of touch with the masses of America, maybe, right? But the rhetoric...
Of course they are. And not only that, why is he buying a Brooks Brother blazer? He should have bought a Ralph Lauren blazer. What the hell's wrong with this guy?
Elites and globalists. So often in history is the stuff
got from single cool guy car to married guy car to family car. I'm just...
Is the stuff of, I mean, first of all, it's the stuff of populist politics everywhere. That's true. But it's also the stuff of very toxic, illiberal politics. I'm going to give you an example to make this clear. Very, very often, anti-elite, anti-globalist rhetoric really ends up being anti-Semitism. Now, I'm not here to say that the national security strategy is anti-Semitic. That would be absurd. But if you look at this historically, and you look at different countries, France and Germany, and US also, and everywhere in the world, really, very often, illiberalism and anti-Semitism go hand in hand.
Yeah, I
the
agree
one
with
is
that.
a cover for the other, or the one is instrumentalized by the other.
Right.
So I'm not saying this is bad for the Jews or anything like that. It's rather the presence, the functional presence of anti-Semitic rhetoric, the discourse.
The other side of this is that when you have policies that what he calls illiberal, really just antithetical to Reagan and Thatcherism, all right, that's a way to circumvent the overuse of the lobbying group by the Israelis. All right? We have a problem in the United States, and it's our lobbying group in so many spheres. Do you think globalization happened because it was just about shareholder value? No, it was a strong lobbying group that opened up the doors. And then supercharged with PAC money. Now, what will be interesting is when the legality of PACs in politics is looked at by the Supreme Court, and if it's struck down, politics are going to radically change. Because that means that you're starting to normalize between the ones that are the voters, and you're reducing that power dynamic between the rich, all right? Because rich create PACs. Rich give money. The PACs push the campaign forward. Well, if you eliminate the PACs, then you are eliminating some of the, quote, legal money to influence politics. And that's domestically, that's the Koch brothers, that's the Walmart family, that's also the Israelis. But he's right that there's a tendency that illiberalism and anti-Semitism has a tendency to be hand in hand. But there is the U.S., the United States political scene needs to truncate the lobbying power of the Israelis.
Is a signal. It should alert everybody to the illiberal nature of the larger politics. So this might have nothing to do with Jews. It might never lead to the targeting Jews. Let's never mind that. It's about illiberalism and a critique of liberal politics. I think fundamentally, liberal politics are what makes the West the best. That's why I like the Pax Americana, because fundamentally, more often than not, it tends to espouse liberal politics, certainly far more than the alternatives to the American Imperium, which I think tend to.
The problem comes in is that sometimes it's a slippery slope, and this wokeism attaches itself to a liberal politic, and you start to have infighting, and that's what we're having today. I mean, just look at it. I mean, people can't even have Thanksgiving together anymore. Should we have an open society? Yes. But if you have too much of an open society, then you let in undesirables. Well, if you have too many of those undesirables, it's causing more havoc with the use of taxpayer money. Do you think it's right to be funding illegal immigrants and not supporting our elderly and our veterans? He went to Yale. Yale supports their veterans. I mean, out of the Ivy League, they're probably the biggest supporters of veterans. There are more veteran organizations out of Yale than out of Harvard. But Yale and Harvard are pretty damn close in supporting veterans. The sad thing is both of those schools also are pushing ultra-liberalism. I mean, I believe out of the Ivy League, the only football team that actually holds the American flag as they're running onto the field at the beginning of the game is Yale. Harvard doesn't do that. Why? I don't know. Probably too much money coming from China.
Very, very illiberal. I mean, for China, liberalism is good. I don't mean Hillary Clinton or Nancy Pelosi liberalism. I mean like classic liberalism that emerged in the Enlightenment, the 19th century, the liberalism of the founding fathers and Madison Monroe, and British Constitution.
Being an open society, not a closed society. Not being, not being dictatorial, or what he called an empire, imperial. It's literally, in terms of economics, it's Reagan and Thatcherism. But we want an open society. We want a society that has enlightenment. The problem comes in is that if you're too open, too porous, then you get poisonous venom in your society. So there needs to be a means through the Enlightenment or these liberal policies where you can filter out the poison. Now, he doesn't use the terms, but there is a conservatism about this. It's this pendulum between conservatism and this ultra-liberalism. Now, not the liberalism he's talking about, the ultra-liberal. All right? So you have this conservatism. If it's too conservative, it could be imperial. If it's too liberal, ultra-liberalism, if it's too woke, then you have a society that is not open-minded. Woke is not open-minded, but neither is ultra-conservatism. That's not open-minded either. It's very parochial. There needs to be a middle ground, all right? That enlightenment, that renaissance, maybe it's neo-renaissance, maybe it's neo-enlightenment. But the thing is that there needs to be a middle ground where there's a way to filter out the negatives of both sides, the imperialistic side of conservatism and the wokeism of a porous country. So it goes back to the pillars: God, country, and family. If you don't have strong pillars, God, country, and family, then what will happen is that you will tend to move towards imperialism, or you will have a society that tends to move towards this ultra woke. See, the problem is that the liberal has hijacked the meaning of liberalism.
So that kind of thing. It's all good. Good stuff. But the anti-elite rhetoric and the globalist rhetoric, it's very, very corrosive. It's very poisonous. It promotes.
Yeah, it's corrosive. But the thing is what happens when you have a hyper-globalization that has hurt your debt to GDP ratios, has hurt your economic prowess because it's gutted its economic clustering. What happens when hyperglobalization reduced your military prowess? Of course, there's going to be a knee-jerk reaction that these globalists are bad, and in many ways they are. If you ask a real globalist that's really making tons of money, billionaires, they think that things are going to get rough and for the United States, what do? They find an island to hide on. They build a gigantic yacht, that's worth $350 million. They have a private jet. They think that they're untouchable. They don't care about what havoc they create. Look at what's going on with the Zuckerbergs. Why does he have a bunker? Why doesn't he have like a nuclear bunker in Hawaii? Because he's afraid that when AI takes everything over, the people are going to be pissed off because they lost their homes, and the society will hunt him down. No, we have to be very mindful of hyperglobalists or these people that are really pushing the national security state. Well, it's corrosive.
Dividing between real and true Americans or French people or Brits or whatever, and these sort of like nefarious, unpatriotic, traitorous outsiders who are actively working against the interests of the true Americans or French or British or what have you. It's really very toxic and really very dangerous. This ends up with persecution. Somebody's going to get persecuted as a result.
But it's also problematic if you don't pay attention to these factions that are in existence. There are transnational capitalists that don't care about a nation. They have so much money, and power that they don't have an affinity to country. This goes back to what I've been saying: God, country, and family. God will give you the ethics. Country will give you the foundation of building roots and having virtue. And family will give you the cornerstone for a better life, a better society. But when you lose patriotism or country, and you're just a digital nomad, as they call them, you're missing a key pillar of society. Now, there's digital nomads that are just roaming around. They don't really have an affinity to country. Those are really worker bees, all right? Maybe they have their own company, but they're really just kind of like contractual. But there are people that are really super wealthy that are transnational capitalists. They do not have an affinity to country. That's 100% that happens. There are people that are living on Billionaire Row in Manhattan that fall in this category. Or what about in Europe or in England or in London? What about in Paris? So you got to go after these people because they are part of the problem.
This doesn't end well. It never ends well. It either ends nowhere because it's of inconsequence. And fortunately in American history, we've had our share of very liberal political groups, far left and far right, but they tend not to have gotten very far and not infected the mainstream. Whereas in other places, like in France, they affected the mainstream in terms of like Vichy, or the periods of time in many countries where the illiberalism wins out over the liberal center. Germany, of course, is a classic example. What we see in this national security strategy
liberalism, this center of liberalism, I would categorize as being pragmatic, the pragmatism. Pragmatism.
The more of the entry, more of the penetration of very illiberal politics, or let's say illiberal adjacent, because it's not, we're getting close, into the mainstream American political discourse. Because now it's part of our national strategy. How does a liberalism feature as a part of our national strategy? We see the same thing in the rhetoric about Europe that we find in the national strategy. The national security strategy talks about Europe in this really weird way.
I'd like to know when Reagan said, "We win, Soviet Union loses," which led eventually to the fall of the Berlin Wall. Would he consider that illiberal? Because I think that was a glorious day when the Berlin Wall fell. Sometimes you have to step over that centrist marker and get the job done. Oh, that may be illiberal, aren't we supposed to just sing Kumbaya and have, open dialogue, and it's the Enlightenment? Well, that's great. That's just pie in the sky. But the reality of the situation is that people are Machiavellian. Groups of people are Machiavellian. Societies are Machiavellian. You better be able to fight if you need to fight.
Of liberalism, because there's this critique of European liberalism, European liberal values, and it clearly endorses far-right nationalist European politics. Very interesting. So why are we dismissing Russia while saying that the real threat are European liberals and European liberal politics? We are endorsing far-right politics in Europe. What's that all about? This is, to me, extremely, extremely dangerous. I'm not comfortable with this at all. I mean, also, as you said, one of the weird things about the whole anti-elite discourse that one finds in American politics, among other places, is that very often it's being espoused by people who are themselves elite, right? Because so elites have caught on to the idea that bashing the elite is profitable. I mean, there's so many people today in the American public sphere, people who really clearly are elites, just look at their resumes and where they went to school, that kind of thing, who are like leading the front in the sort of bashing of the elites. And it's like, who are you kidding? And of course, there's Donald Trump, a very wealthy man who inherited his wealth. Who's not elite there? Or JD?
I'm for music. It's got to be my new one.
Your new album?
Yeah, play it on Amazon Music.
I'm a bad man.
Who's not elite there? Or JD Vance, right? Who went to Yale Law School, which is as elite gets in the United States. Or, he's said to be.
First of all, I guess there's a spectrum of elitism. There's the ones that are the trust fund baby that's never had to work a day in their life. All right. And then there are ones on the other side of the spectrum where they started with nothing and then they ended up getting power and went to good schools and whatever, right? JD Vance is on the latter side of the spectrum, where he started from almost nothing and eventually moved forward. And he served his country, all right, which is very important, right? Now, Trump, he had a couple $1 million or whatever it was from his father's business, and he grew it to billions. Now, he inherited wealth, but the thing is that he was able to grow it and build an empire far exceeding what his father had. So Trump is more in the middle of the elites. But the thing is with Trump, because he was trying to build into the Manhattan real estate landscape, and he was from not as wealthy of a family, and he was from Queens, that he had a hard time doing it. And this is part of the reason why he's always pushing back on people that are negative on him, because of this environment that he was trying to build into, literally, in Manhattan. Because there were many families that had more control of the commercial and residential development of Manhattan than Trump. He was a newcomer. He was the new kid on the block because he came from Queens. So there's a little bit of a roughness about him. So he's more maybe in the middle, maybe a little bit closer to Vance than the trust fund babies. So it's too simplistic to say that Trump is an elitist.
The creature of, what's his name, Thiel, who is himself, he's a billionaire, who he went to Stanford, where I also went, but I seem to have skipped the class or missed out on the class on how to be a billionaire, and then went to Stanford Law, and was able to bring Vance into this very
I thought he said he was from Yale.
Of Silicon Valley venture capitalism, and these elites who are enriching elites and investing in now there are elites, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, who are you trying to kid? Like, how do any of these people become the spokesperson for the working class? But they make this claim and people accept it. Now, we're on the subject of liberal politics. There's, I want to signal this one passage here, which I find very curious, particularly its presence in a national security strategy. It says, finally, we want the restoration and reinvigoration of American spiritual and cultural health, without which long-term security is impossible. We want an America that cherishes its past glories and its heroes, which I guess is why we are removing things like displays about African Americans who fought in the military, that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Why do you have to make a face like
why
that?
We are reverting back to the names of Confederate generals. Or
I mean, it looks like he's shitting his pants.
Generals, because then we're going to celebrate them rather than talk about how bad they were. And that looks forward to a new golden age. We want a people who are proud, happy, and optimistic that they will have their country, that they will leave their country to the next generation better than they found it. We want a gainfully employed citizenry, sounds great, with no one sitting on the sidelines who takes satisfaction from knowing that their work is essential to the prosperity of our nation and to the well-being of individuals and families. Great. This cannot be accomplished without growing numbers of strong traditional families that raise healthy children. Okay, very Vichy, all right, but what exactly does that mean, and how do you actually achieve that? If that's our end state, what are the means that you use to create that? Strong traditional families, because now we get into like Christian values stuff, and of course gay marriage is bad, and then by healthy children, based on what we've seen from the Trump administration, I think that means that we're raising our kids drinking unpasteurized milk and certainly not giving them vaccinations. That's how we get healthy children. It's really very odd. It's Vichy, it's weird, and
think tanker that's going to tell you about the immune system. Same guy that's saying that Americans can't build anything. And he looks constipated.
I don't understand really why this is part of the national security strategy. Maybe appropriate for some sort of Sunday sermon, I suppose, in certain circles, but it's just kind of weird in a official U.S. government talk show. I really hope you like this video. Thank you very much. Like I said before, please hit like and subscribe. If you look in the description, you'll find links to my social media, my Blue Sky, my Twitter, and LinkedIn, also my own website, michaelschmidt.com, and also my Substack, which is also called Pax Americana. Stay tuned. There's a lot in the pipeline, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye-bye.
I don't have time to go around and film B-roll all day, make my own music, and take photos of food. I just use Storyblocks. Storyblocks is a complete stock solution for creators like myself that provide an unlimited library of royalty-free videos, audio, and images. If you're a creator and you want to have the biggest hack on the internet, then check out Storyblocks.
Alrighty, so now what I want to do is go over another video here.
We're joined today by Gilbert Cottrell.
I want to go over another video here about the strategy that's taking place here. Now this is DW talking about Trump's strategy and how it's affecting Europe. All right. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the heirloom barley. This is a great way to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals. It's a micronutrient protein. It's a month's supply. You take it every day, and it's going to help to boost up your immune system, help with your endocrine system, and if you take this regularly, you're also will recover quicker when you work out. Bringing down inflammation when you work out will help with the recovery process. Another great product that will help to detoxify your body, and you use it as a deodorant, are the dual purpose deodorants that I have. It's for males and females. You can get it in citrus or in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas, extremely high quality. Very high quality. All right? Use this every day as a deodorant, but it'll also help to detoxify your body. And when you do that, you're helping your immune system and endocrine system. And another way to detoxify your body is to take the zeolite. 3 small drops underneath your tongue, drink filtered water, and voila. It binds to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals, allows you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. Do this every day, and your immune system and your endocrine system will perform better. But make sure that you drink filtered water and stay away from processed foods. Those processed foods have a lot of chemicals in them that are bad for you. In addition, clean your environment at home. Be cognizant of the cleaning agents and the paints that you may have in your garage or in your basement. You may want to get rid of them or put them in a double layered container. Please go to my store, get the zeolite, detoxify your body. So a great way to get healthy, take the zeolite, get the deodorants, and get the heirloom barley. And again, by detoxifying your body and bringing down inflammation, you're going to slow down the aging process, boost up your immune system. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order, all caps, discount 5. And if you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
My energy bill dropped from $150 to $50 by doing this. My friends laughed at me when I spent $49 on a power saver device that could cut my energy bill in.
Shift in Washington's approach to the alliance. TDP World spoke with Belinda Nihus, former NATO Deputy Director for Defense and Security Cooperation, who warned the document could be bad news for Europe and even better news for Russia.
The freshly unveiled U.S. national security strategy has raised eyebrows among European NATO member states. TDP World spoke to Belinda Nihus, former NATO Deputy Director for Defense and Security Cooperation, to get her immediate reaction to the document.
In a nutshell,
So you're seeing in real time the battle between Trump's strategy, we'll call it Neo-Monroe Doctrine, all right? And the neocon strategy, where it's Europe and the Middle East. The neocon strategy isn't so much Asia. It's Europe and the Middle East. So there's an infighting that's happening.
Paper is bad news for Europe, bad news for Ukraine, very mixed news for NATO, but at the same time, it's very good news for the populist right-wingers in some of our countries, and it's even better news for Russia.
One of the points of Washington's newest course of action addresses the political situation in Europe. The document states that the US's broad policy on Europe should prioritize cultivating resistance to Europe's current trajectory within European nations.
What we are seeing here is a MAGA blueprint for Europe, and Trump wants to bond with his right-wing counterparts wherever they are, in order to turn Europe into a mini MAGA.
One of the most grating points of the new plan is the one regarding NATO's future expansion, which reads, ending the perception and preventing the reality of NATO as a perpetually expanding alliance.
What is most harmful, clearly, is that it basically seeks to revoke NATO's open door policy for eventual membership of other countries. And this open door policy, I mean, that's enshrined in the alliance founding treaty. So it's nothing which is a little petitesse. I mean, it's really one of the cores of the alliance.
With all of these less than ideal news for Europe's relationship with the US, one question remains. Is the transatlantic alliance in a state of collapse?
On a strategic level, it is in an existential crisis because topics like Russia, Ukraine, Europeans...
The Atlantic Alliance isn't going to collapse. It's just less relevant. That's all. It's not collapsing. It's just that the United States needs to focus on our hemisphere and the next move right after that, the Asian theater. And guess what? If they were so worried about Russia, why did they keep on buying its energy?
China, all these necessary strategic discussions can no longer happen in NATO with a US which is performing the way it is performing.
With drawn-out peace negotiations, Russian sabotage attempts, and now what seems like an American exodus from Europe, some of the toughest times in recent history are ahead of the old continent.
As Washington released its new national security strategy, TVP World investigated how the document compares to its previous editions, from Joe Biden's administration and Donald Trump's first time in the Oval Office. The analysis found Europe is no longer viewed as an equal and vital partner for the U.S., while Russia plays a less central role, and NATO enlargement has become more controversial.
This could potentially be one of the biggest criticisms of Europe to ever be put on an official US document, so let's jump straight into it. Let's compare it to a document of same kind, but from the predecessor of Donald Trump, Joe Biden, from 2022. So when it comes to Europe, Donald Trump this year sees Europe as weak, as misguided. This is clear from numerous points in this document. He says that Europe is facing a stark prospect of civilizational erasure, and that the US should be cultivating resistance to Europe's current trajectory within European nations, very much presenting the US as the country which should be guiding Europe to some kind of direction. When we compare it to Joe Biden, this is a massive difference, as Joe Biden viewed Europe as an equal partner and ally. He said that Europe has been and will continue to be the foundational partner for the United States when it comes to facing global challenges. Now, when it comes to Russia, Donald Trump in 2025 sees Russia as having strategic potential. He says it's in the core interest of the United States to re-establish strategic stability with Russia, and that Europe should do the same. Meanwhile, Joe Biden viewed Russia as an existential threat in 2022. This is just after the start of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. And really, when you look through these documents, all you have to do to see the shift in focus is just look at how many times the word Russia appears in both documents. In the document from 2025 from Donald Trump, the National Security Strategy, the word Russia appears only 10.
Strategic potential with Russia. Why? To do a pincer move against China. Hello? This is the same playbook that we did against the Nazis. Now with Biden, Europe is an equal partner. Really? Russia, existential threat, see, perma-bear. And NATO, stronger together. NATO is becoming irrelevant. Because how's NATO going to help us in the Pacific?
Whereas in Joe Biden's document, the word appears 71 times. So a huge, huge difference in focus when it comes to Russia and its relations with the United States. Now, when it comes to NATO, Donald Trump views it as problematic nowadays. He says that the United States should end the perception and prevent the reality of NATO as a perpetually expanding alliance. Now, the word expanding is also curious here, as really this is also mirroring the narrative of the Kremlin, which says that NATO is expanding, whereas the alliance is actually enlarging. There is an enlargement of NATO, meaning that countries are willingly joining the alliance. There is no actual forceful expansion of NATO. When it comes to Joe Biden, he saw NATO as stronger together. He praised the fact that Finland and Sweden joined NATO in the last 2 years. But okay, we have Democratic President Joe Biden, we have Republican President Donald Trump, so you could say that there is no surprise that there is such big difference. But let's actually compare Donald Trump to Trump. Let's see how the same document written by Donald Trump in 2017 compares to the one that he has presented us with nowadays. We can see that when it comes to Europe, Donald Trump in 2017 viewed it as a vital partner, aspiring partner of the United States. When it comes to Russia, he viewed it as an adversary, not as a strategic partner. He said here, and I quote, that Russia is using subversive measures to weaken the credibility of America's commitment to Europe, standing between America and Europe. But now this divide is seeming bigger and bigger, and it's also on the part of Donald Trump. Now, when it comes to NATO, in 2017, Donald Trump saw NATO as an important alliance which adhered to the rule of crucial common defense. In 2017, in the National Security Strategy, Donald Trump mentions Article 5 of the Washington Treaty.
Do they have industrial amnesia? They're doing Trump-to-Trump comparison from 2025 to 2027, 2025 to 2017, pre-COVID. Don't you think things have changed with biological warfare? Hello? Hello? What about decoupling from China? Radically different now. See, this is just Eurowhiner complaining that the United States is saying that, Europe, you need to clean up your own backyard. Are they helping us clean up South America? No, of course not. Why? Because that's our backyard.
That an attack against one is an attack against all, a crucial NATO rule. There is no such mention of Article 5 in the document from 2025. So really, the difference in the documents between 2025 and 2017, written by the same people, Donald Trump, the same person, rather, Donald Trump, is really massive.
Former Polish foreign.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here. Wishing you a very happy half-off holiday, because right now Mint Mobile is offering you to get a 50% off unlimited, which our set decorator, well, took pretty literally. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. Okay, Mint is still premium, unlimited wireless for a great price, but we're festive, we're not reckless. So, that means a half day, yeah? Yeah, okay. Okay, leaving, nobody's stopping me.
Former Polish Foreign Minister Adam Rotfeld commented on the recent American announcement that it would not expand NATO further.
The timing of the statement announcing that the United States would not expand NATO is tied to the talks that took place in Russia between Witkoff and Kushner on one side and Putin and Ushakov on the other. This is apparently the result of an agreement between the American and Russian delegations. The issue of Moldova and other countries that are not part of the alliance is a valid question to raise. However, that question has already been answered by the Americans.
David Dunn, professor of international politics at the University of Birmingham, told TDP World that the new U.S. national security strategy marks a sharp break from 8 decades of foreign policy. That it reflects the collapse of America's long-standing consensus around an internationalist, rules-based liberal order.
That marks a huge change to the America that we have gotten used to and know. It's a rejection of the world that America built. It's a rejection of America's place in that world, and it's a rejection of the idea that America is about having alliances with common interests and common values with its closest allies in Europe. Instead, what we get is criticism of Europe for being too liberal from a United States that isn't willing to criticize countries in the Middle East or anywhere else in the world for their lack of liberalism.
On Friday evening, the German Chancellor and the President of the European Commission spoke with the Belgian Prime Minister about frozen Russian assets. Prime Minister Bart de Wever is reluctant to activate and hand over the frozen Russian assets, to Ukraine in the form of so-called reparations loan. Belgium is concerned that it bears too much risk of a potential Russian retaliation and the prospect of financial claims against Belgium. The EU and Germany, on the other hand, are among those who believe that using the frozen assets to support Ukraine is necessary to strengthen Kiev's position in the ongoing peace negotiations. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that after the meeting, quote, Belgium's particular situation regarding the use of the frozen Russian assets is undeniable and must be addressed in such a way that all European states bear the same risk, end quote. The European Union hopes to reach a consensus on this issue by December 18th, when European leaders are scheduled to meet in Brussels. Even if a blanket amnesty is included in a Russia-Ukraine peace deal, International Criminal Court arrest will...
All right, this is from France 24. Europe already formidable enough to deter any aggression, even without the United States. Really? Let's see. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the magnesium and zinc and the vitamin C and magnesium. Dual purpose. Magnesium will help with brain function. Vitamin C will help with your skin. And magnesium and zinc and vitamin C and magnesium will help to boost up your immune system. Extremely important during the winter season. But if you take this on a regular basis, you're actually going to improve your immune system and your brain function. So you should take it every day. Clarity factor, a very powerful neurostack. It's going to get rid of that brain fog, allow you to concentrate on tasks in school or at work or even at home. And clarity factor over time will improve your neuroplasticity. You'll have positive neuroplasticity where your dendritic connections will improve. You'll think faster and you'll have better memory. This is a very powerful neurostack. Please go to my store, drink it with filtered water, get the clarity factor, take it every day. Resveratrol, something I've been taking for decades. Resveratrol is an antioxidant. It'll also help to bring down inflammation, soaks up free radicals, improves the health of your mitochondria, so you'll have more ATP. Resveratrol also helps with youthful gene expression, and resveratrol helps to get rid of cells that are in senescence. What that basically is that a cell just sits there and just collects garbage, all right? Well, you want to get rid of those. Resveratrol helps that. So please go to my store, get the resveratrol. You take this on a regular basis, your skin will improve because it helps with the basal layer, and it's going to help slow down the aging process. This stacks really well with C60, NAD+, and ubiquinol, and the clarity factor. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. So let's listen more about the Euroliners.
Introducing automated mileage tracking with Soho Expense. Whether it's heading to
The nuance we see in the new concept certainly appeals to us. It speaks of the need for dialogue.
The spotlight's certainly landing on tensions between old alliances. That's following Friday's release of that bombshell national security strategy by Washington that paints Europe as weak and facing civilizational collapse. We've already seen reactions from EU policy chief Kaja Kallas aiming to at least temper the situation, saying that Europe is the best chance of fighting against Russian aggression. Now EU Council President Antonio Costa has hit back, telling the Trump administration not to meddle in or influence European affairs. Let's take a look.
Europe cannot accept the threat of US interference in its politics. That's according to the EU Council President Antonio Costa, who on Monday hit out at Washington's recent ideological criticism of the bloc's trajectory.
The United States cannot replace European citizens in choosing which parties are good and which are bad.
His words come just days after the US released its new national security strategy, in which the current administration expressed disdain for the European Union and other transnational bodies, saying they undermine political liberty and sovereignty, migration policies that are transforming the continent and creating strife. The document also indicated support for the rise of far-right politicians in Europe, saying explicitly that the growing influence of patriotic European parties indeed gives cause for great optimism. Some members of the bloc, such as Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, have sought to play down the criticism.
You know, US is still our biggest ally, and there I read it as well that we are still the biggest ally.
While others, such as Polish President Donald Tusk, tried to remind the US that they share common enemies and that Europe is their closest ally, not their problem. Regardless, it is now enshrined into US policy Washington's intent to pull back its support for Europe, and that it also wants to see the NATO alliance stop perpetually expanding. It's a win for Moscow.
The nuance we see in the new concept certainly appeals to us. It speaks of the need for dialogue and building constructive, good relations. This is certainly appealing, and it's entirely consistent with our vision.
Another notable point that will have Europe on edge and Moscow satisfied is that the strategy does not cast Russia as a threat to the United States.
Let's unpack this now with Claude-France Arnoux, Senior Fellow at the Brussels Institute for Geopolitics, also former head of the European Defence Agency, as well as France's former ambassador to Belgium. Thank you so much, Claude-France, for joining us. I wonder if you take the position of Kaja Kallas or of Antonio Costa here. Do you believe that the US is undermining Europe's autonomy?
Yes, quite clearly. I think the president of the European Council said something that is quite obvious. We always had kind of dilemma or double speech from the United States, be able to defend yourself, be independent, but at the same time buy everything you want to buy from us. And that has always been the very strange language from the United States. Now what is new, and I think Costa's reaction was absolutely legitimate, is quite openly presented intention to interfere in our internal political landscape and life. That is, at that level, and with the expressions that we have in the security strategy, the American security strategy, is really it's rather new, at least it's new to acknowledge it and to put it as a deliberate strategic objective.
Having worked in the corridors of power, you've seen US-EU relations, and you've seen how they've simmered, coming from previously the Obama administration, the Biden administration, Trump as well in between that. Is this anything new, or has it actually been simmering for a long time?
What is not new, and I must say that we must acknowledge that the Americans have been very clear since Obama, is to warn us, be able to be non-dependent, to act by yourself. You should be now security providers. I take words heard from the Pentagon. You should be security providers, not security customers. Then again, we have been hearing this very clear message from the United States. We want to find up to Asia and then do your job in the United States. During decades, that was the language, even before I was in the European Defence Agency. And very few people accepted to listen to that and to take action according to this very clear message from Washington: be autonomous and be able to defend yourself. Again, now that is not new. What is new is to say some of you are good fellows and we will support, and you have mentioned quotes which are really incredible in this strategy, because a strategy is not a tweet. Normally it's something that is a very thorough examination of long-term strategy of big states like the United States. And let's imagine that our French strategy or the EU strategy, we would say that, well, we have great doubts about the American civilization and we want to interfere to make sure that those who go in the direction we think good, we will support them by all means.
I think audacious is the word that we would use quite aptly here. In terms of who needs to win whose trust back, does Europe need to earn America's trust in terms of defense, or does the United States need to earn Europe's trust in terms of being a reliable partner again?
Why not just Europe clean up their own mess? Oh, by the way, the United States, for a long time, was supporting NATO way beyond what any of the other European nations were doing. And those European nations were giving a lot of freebies to their citizens, a lot of social programs, free healthcare, free this, free that. Now, I'm against socialism, but the thing is that American taxpaying dollars were subsidizing those socialistic policies for those countries. That's what was happening. And that's the reason why the Euro whiners are whining. Meanwhile, our elderly have to pick between eating or taking their medication. You think that's fair? No, of course not.
Yes, and I think we must have trust in what we do. I think there is something rather difficult in the present narrative from Europeans, is that as President Tusk very clearly said, we would be able to fight, and including to fight Russia, by ourselves without the Americans. Tusk was very clear on that. I personally tried to also write some elements on this for the Brussels Institute. We, for the first time in its history, would Russia attack us, they would have all the European states that they had to fight in the past all together against an aggression. Then we are able to fight. And because we want to be able to do more, and we need to do more, you hear a narrative saying that we are not able. I think we must be clear, we are able if we have to, but we will nevertheless improve our capabilities to have an even stronger defense, including against rather new forms of attacks, such as the hybrid cyber attacks. And we need to do more, but we are already formidable enough to deter any aggression, even without the United States. But I think what is really important now is that when we develop our capabilities, is that the objective should be to develop these capabilities with real non-dependence from the United States. And I don't know if the security strategy will be the necessary shock from some of our member states, but they see what dependence means. The weapons they are trying to develop will do just what the Pentagon wants them to do.
That's quite interesting, because it sounds to me like you're saying that Europe can in fact take a lead on NATO, just like the United States wants it to, according to the security strategy.
I didn't exactly say that, because I'm not sure that the solution is for Europeans to take the lead in NATO. We have to check whether NATO, which has been built for the American prevalence, the Americans being the leaders in NATO, could be efficiently transformed in an organization led by Europeans. For instance, the American ambassador in Berlin said, well, we should have a German secure. I don't know. I rather know NATO and NATO's functioning. It's very much built on this American backbone. Then should we take the lead in NATO? Many people think that. Another solution would be to take the lead in another format and make sure that our communication, our intelligence, our space assets would be independent assets, which is not today the case in NATO.
What would you then suggest in terms of that kind of alternative if you're looking at what's happened around Ukraine today?
I think that there's been a kind of natural reliance on those who can most and those who will do most. Then you have the UK, you have Germany, you have France, you have other EU member states having very good historical knowledge of the situation, which are very important. And you have some actors with military capabilities and with military responsibilities at home that play an important role. You have them on the screen. But you have the Brits, you have the Germans, you have the French. You can have others. It's not exclusive. But then, being in the situation where we are, I think it's more for those personalities to represent what Europe can build and the role we can play for a peace settlement, because it's our peace on our continent. It's not an American peace for us. It's our peace for Europeans. And I think we should rely on those member states or non-member states like the UK who are ready to take action. But nevertheless, nevertheless, use the EU instruments we have.
Just a quick one on that. What instruments in the immediate term?
Well, I think we have two instruments in the European Union that we didn't use their potential. On armament and capabilities, you have the European Defence Agency. I think it should really play a major role for cooperation, because we are going to increase the national budget. We do already increase the national budget, but we will be successful only if we do it in cooperation. Then use the instruments you have for that. For armament and capabilities development, you have this European Defence Agency. Second, why don't we have permanent military headquarters, which appropriate CIS, advanced planning, train teams, which would be able to support any kind of either coalition or EU or national intervention that would be necessary. Then have headquarters. Headquarters, it's not only men. It's training, it's again communication and some capabilities that you need in advance for headquarters. And if it is a duplication with NATO, well, duplication are not useless if we consider scenarios of major disruption or war. Having 2 or 3 capable headquarters in Europe is just better.
A very fascinating prospect if that does come to fruition. But France Arnaud, thank you so much. It will be interesting to see if this relationship can in fact be fixed as well. But France, they're just discussing the possibility of European Defence Organization headquarters in Europe.
All right, we're going to go to Times Radio talking about how Trump thinks Europe is weak, which it is. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 will help with gene expression, because it's a gene expression cofactor. It'll help to absorb calcium, do resistance training, and it'll help to build denser bone, super important. And vitamin D3 is super important to get rid of cells that are infected. It helps to force them to go into apoptosis. Take vitamin D3 every day. Olive leaf extract, dual purpose. It's going to help to boost up your immune system and help with your lipid profile. So it's helping your immune system and helping your cardiovascular system. Digestive enzyme complex helps to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, reduce the load on your pancreas. It also has bromelain that helps to break up clots, and has proteolytic enzymes in digestive enzyme complex that helps to break up glycoproteins. Super important for the winter season. Please go to my store, use discount 5. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
Let's begin by talking now about Donald Trump, which is just as much fun, and the difficulty he's having achieving world peace. Because he keeps boasting about ending his wars. He says he's ended 8 wars. But some of those diplomatic achievements are looking, well, fragile, even more fragile than they were at the time. He's clearly working hard to end the war in Ukraine, after a fashion. But unsurprisingly, Kyiv and Moscow can't agree on how to do that. President Zelensky is insisting today still that he isn't prepared to give land to Russia, as he has always insisted. And in the Middle East, phase 2 of the Gaza peace deal is getting nearer, but we're not there. We learned today that Trump's plans for Tony Blair on the Gaza border peace is a no-goer because some Arab states were rejected. And one of the wars that he definitely claimed to have ended was the conflict between Cambodia and Thailand, which I personally appreciated a huge deal, because while he ended it, I was literally in Cambodia and Thailand was on my way home. So thanks for that, Donald. So they've been exchanging fire again in the past few days as well. Megan, is he just not actually all that good at this?
I mean, he clearly really wants that Nobel Peace Prize that he said he...
Even though he's already got the football one.
Yeah, I think something about Donald Trump is he's obviously very good at kind of being that public sort of facing negotiator. He is quite good at getting people in the room, but I think that what he's been good at is not necessarily sort of doing kind of like a positive peace, thinking long term, how do we sort of ensure that these conflicts don't bubble up again. I mean, he literally said he would end the war in Ukraine, so basically as soon as he got into office, and that definitely hasn't happened. I mean, he's almost been the president for a year.
He said 24 hours after he got elected, not even before he got into office.
Yeah.
It was going to be, yeah.
So that obviously hasn't happened. But I do think, you know, he is obviously...
Was he over-optimistic about trying to solve the war issue with Ukraine and Russia? Yeah, he was over-optimistic. But why is it that the Eurowhiners have to constantly bring that up? Also CNN, are they Eurowhiners too? They're always constantly bringing up, Trump said he was going to end the war in 24 hours. All right, you know, he was a bit off on that, all right? But at least he's trying. What did we get from Biden? Nothing. Oh, that's because he's brain dead.
The fact that America does have a lot more power, especially more than Europe. So I think that, you know, we can criticize him over here, but
what are we doing?
What are we doing?
Yeah,
exactly.
That's true. Is it, Patrick, is it a sort of slightly like a real estate thing? That when you negotiate a deal to buy a skyscraper, as I'm sure you've done, once you buy
one up, one down skyscraper.
Once you buy the skyscraper, it stays bought. Right, you don't negotiate your deal to buy the skyscraper, and then the next day someone goes, "Oh, actually, I'm taking back a bit of that skyscraper. I know I'm still occupying the first 30 floors." You know, once it's done, it's done, and so he can get people to sign things. He can bully people to say a thing. But then what happens 3 weeks later, once he's taken his eye off the ball, he just doesn't seem to have much grasp on.
He's very keen on the tweet or the Truth Social, whatever the verb is for what you do on Truth Social. He's very keen, very keen on making the announcements and let it. It has been, I have said it, therefore it is done. Less good on the detail. I'm shocked that the winner of the FIFA Peace on Earth Goodwill to Men Award, the illustrious award, and I'm looking forward to the FIFA Literature Prize, by the way.
Yeah, that would be great. Sorry, I forget who it was who was saying that the Nobel Committee should just announce the winner of the World Cup tomorrow and be done with it.
Yeah. I'm amazed that he finds that peace is actually a bit harder than just putting out a truth. But you know, this is a man who, by the way, has been given a peace prize from an organisation, despite saying again publicly that he might take away the World Cup from certain cities if they're mean to him.
Right.
So the Democrat mayors of various American cities might actually lose the World Cup, and for that the FIFA gave him the peace prize. Look, I mean, yesterday he called a reporter obnoxious. His standard modus operandi is to be rude and belittling to people. So quite why he thinks he's the man to bring peace around the world, I don't know. But maybe behind the scenes, things will emerge. But I mean, certainly the front man isn't very good.
I mean, the fascinating one, the principally fascinating one is Russia and Ukraine, because it seems so intractable. His strategy very, very much does seem to be to agree completely different deals with both sides and then be cross with both of them when they don't agree sort of to the other one. I mean, it's a whole new kind of diplomacy, like in a way. And one day this war will.
Let me just interrupt. The S&P 500 is at 6,858. I still have a target of 6,850 to 6,900 for year end for the S&P 500. The Federal Reserve is going to make their move tomorrow, so markets will probably move based on that news announcement. Bitcoin is trading at 94,000 right now. Oil is trading at 58.24. And natural gas is trading at 4.77. Now, this morning, I've been shorting natural gas. Made a little bit of money on that. And the euro is trading at 116. Japanese yen is trading at 156.9. VIX is trading at 16. So equities, there's not that much stress going on in equities. If the Federal Reserve lowers rates tomorrow, then equities will rally. If they don't, if they just hold steady, which is possible, then equities will probably sell off. There was a big increase in the 10-year yield that happened when open jobs data came out this morning. So the big wait here is tomorrow. Federal Reserve, wait it out, see what happens, and then take a look at the positions. Now, what I'm noticing is that energy is starting to drift down. Now, I take the stance that most likely what's happening is there's there's an increase in supply of oil into the market. MBS and Trump have made an agreement. This is my take on it. I can't prove this, but this is just my hypothesis, that they made an agreement to increase supply in the Brent market, keep oil suppressed in terms of price per barrel. So when we hit Venezuela, then the price will spike. I think the price will spike. If we hit Venezuela, I'm surprised we haven't done it already. Oil will probably spike $4. So wait it out. All right, let's continue with Times Radio.
And he will take credit for it, Megan. I mean, do you see any movement there on either side?
I don't know. I think, yeah, I mean, it is a very Trumpian way of doing diplomacy, sort of, telling either side different things. But I think actually the real winners are probably Russia from this. I think that actually, and sort of what Trump has shown since he came in is that I think he actually quite likes that Putin is sort of this big kind of hard man. He likes that he's sort of throwing his weight around, because Donald Trump kind of would like to do that in in his role as president. I mean, we've seen like kind of with the sort of positioning with Canada and things like that. So I actually think that Ukraine and Zelensky. I mean, we saw earlier this year with J.D. Vance and Trump kind of being, that horrific argument that I think was completely unprecedented live on television in the White House. But yeah, I think you're right. Whatever happens, Donald Trump will try to take at least some credit for it. But again, I think it just shows, Keir Starmer has done quite well with the coalition of the willing, but how much power does that actually have over what is happening? I think the real sort of, I think actually that like Russia is becoming sort of the real winners out of this. Obviously they haven't won the war, but this is going sort of well for them.
Well, for the Russian government, if not the Russian people, who are, of course, dying in their hundreds of thousands. Look, he obviously doesn't think much of Europe, Donald Trump. He's referred to the continent as a decaying group of nations, and he's Politico. But he's also asked in that interview what he thinks of Europe's leaders. Listen to this.
I think they're weak. Yeah. But I also think that they want to be so politically correct that I think they don't know what to do. Europe doesn't know what to do. They don't know what to do on trade either. I mean, I look at a lot of the trade, situation that's going on over there is a little bit dangerous. But Europe, they want to be politically correct, and it makes them weak. That's what makes them weak.
I don't really understand what that means. What do you think that means?
Well, it's like the usual Trump biddle. I mean, the man's just a fool.
Oh, he's just a fool. He's just a fool. Now, he does chicken out, but he's not a fool. He's actually pretty smart. Is he intellectual? No, not so much. But he's smart. He has lots of street smarts. And how I know that is that anyone that has done any accounting for development, like real estate development type stuff, and the multi-year accounting and cash flows and investments and funding, that's really complex deals. And he's done hundreds of them. You can't be a fool to do that. Actually, that type of accounting is some of the hardest accounting there is. But a bunch of Euro miners are going to tell you how things are. Now, what Trump is basically saying, if you speak New York, is basically this. Because of the unfettered immigration, you're starting to become Islamabad. Why? Because there's a caliphate that's starting to erode your Western civilization. In addition, being politically correct is just like you can't you can't push back on immigration. And then on top of it, they just believe in socialism. What about the overregulation from Brussels? Why weren't they more coordinated within the EU to be able to circumvent Russia? Why did they need the United States? Why did they have to rely on NATO? Why couldn't they? Oh, they thought that America was just going to pay for everything. No, I think Trump is right on this. And he's not a fool. He's not a fool. He chickens out. He's not a fool. Just a Euro libtards.
Trump, J.D. Vance this week has been criticising Europe for being anti-free speech, which was quickly retweeted by Medvedev, the former president of Russia, saying, hurrah for free speech. I'm not sure free speech is actually a big thing in Russia at the moment.
Russia is a big thing in America at the moment.
No, indeed. But there is clearly a dialogue that Europe is the land of the weak.
Yes.
They don't believe in free speech. They're all woke.
Okay, but why? Is it really about us or is it about them? Because I have this emerging theory that when
they're weak because they're not willing to take a look at their own situation that's decaying their society and push back. They're letting a caliphate to take hold. Look at what's happening in London. Look at what's happening in Paris. It's a shithole. Paris is a shithole.
But on the military, they're kind of right. Obviously, Europe's not been pulling its weight militarily, although, to be fair, we were encouraged not to for the better part of half a century by America, who wanted to have all the power. But I also think when American politicians, right-wing American politicians, attack Europe for being weak, for losing its culture, for losing its direction, for being riddled by crime, really they're talking about their own fears for America that they're casting onto us instead.
Yes, I think that's legitimate. Although, of course, America was initially founded by European migrants, and there might be people who feel close ties back to the motherland who are offended by this. But yes, perhaps they're speaking to an audience back home. But the big test is going to be if Russia ever invades a NATO country.
Yeah.
And then we'll see whether America is actually going to follow what it's meant to do under Article 5, or whether it's let us be on our own. That's the worry.
What do you think that means, Meg? Criticising European leaders for being politically correct. Is it a bit like that bit in 30 Rock where she has to say, just say Jews, this is taking forever? Just say Muslims, Donald, this is taking forever.
I mean, there was some sort of comment or something kind of in discussions recently which said America, I think there was sort of some concern that, in the next few years, Europe will have so many people who, as part of their population, who are immigrants, that they won't actually feel like this sort of national top.
Just listen to the people in England. They're saying that it's no longer England anymore. You have people running around the street with machetes from Northern Africa, taking over London. Hello?
To NATO, which I don't really agree with. If you're living in a country, surely you want that country to be secure, whether you're, whether you were born there or not.
Whatever your ethnic stock.
Exactly. I think it's just a way of America being like, actually, we're not really that invested in NATO anymore, or just not that invested in giving the support to Europe that we have for such a long time. Because, if you look at the politics of Donald Trump, I don't think he is that interested in sort of having this collegiate relationship with Europe. So it's just a way of making it look like it's even more of our fault, where I think
it is your fault.
The
Europeans have destroyed that continent, totally destroyed it, with their socialism and their open border policy. Now you have a caliphate. You have a metastasized caliphate now. Why are you importing your energy from Russia? Don't you think that it's a little odd? Russia's so bad, but you're going to depend on the energy from Russia. Meanwhile, you could easily import LNG from the United States. We have so much natural gas, we're burning it into the atmosphere. The Europeans' government sucks.
About Europe not building itself up. But I don't think that, it's all because of that. I think there is some political stuff going on.
These people are just stupid. These people that are on today for Times Radio are just idiots. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the vitamin B complex. The first 4 B vitamins will boost up your energy levels, boost up your ATP, because they work with the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. Vitamin B complex will improve your cellular metabolism, and vitamin B complex will protect your neurons through vitamin B12. Super important to protect neurons and rev up those cells and improve your metabolism. This is great to take if you're 40 years of age or older. Why? Because it's going to slow down aging. Omega-3 will help with your cardiovascular health. It brings down inflammation and helps with your lipid profile and reduces the over-stickiness of your red blood cells. You don't want your red blood cells to overstick. And Gladiator barley, a great way to build muscle. Do resistance training, take the Gladiator barley. This will also bring down inflammation so you recover quicker. You're going to help with your immune system because it brings down inflammation, detoxifies your body, and soaks up free radicals. And when you do that regularly, you're going to boost up that immune system and help with your endocrine system. When you're bringing down inflammation at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. And by bringing down inflammation at the brain level, you're reducing the stress on your neurons so the neurons are healthier at the micro level, the microenvironment level. Please go to my store and get the Gladiator barley. Stack it. A great stack. Take the Gladiator barley to help build muscle and to bring down inflammation detox. Omega-3 to help with your cardiovascular health. And vitamin B complex to protect your neurons and rev up your metabolism. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. Spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Don't be a Euroliner. All right, let's go to CIA.
Ukraine is, quote, losing. Trump's comments to Politico that Russia is in a stronger position came at a key moment in the negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. And as Ukrainian President Zelensky is stating clearly that Ukraine is not willing to concede land to Russia.
If this deal, if Zelensky rejects this deal, is there a timeline? Is there a point at which you say,
okay, well, he's going to have to get on the ball and start accepting things. You know, when you're losing, because you're losing.
Joining us now is CNN Global Affairs analyst Brett McGurk. Is this a clear sign that Trump is sticking with the U.S. plan that would force Ukraine to give up some territory? He's gone after the president of Ukraine a couple of times in the last couple of days.
Yeah, Sarah, you know, progress has been made in this negotiation. There's a framework for what the end of the war can look like. But on the key issue of territorial concessions, there has been no progress. And it's kind of an error in diplomacy to keep pressing a matter when you know progress can't be made. And right now on this issue of territory, things are stuck. The president seems to have in his mind that this territory is going to be taken by Russia in any case. So Ukraine might as well basically sue for peace and take a deal. But, you know, we're in the 4th year of this war, and the Russians have not been able to take this territory in the Donbass. It's called the Fortress Belt for Ukraine. It's the most defensible territory. They consider it critical to the defense of their country going forward. So I actually think the assumption is the reverse. I think, you know, Russia actually cannot take this land without enormous costs and over a period of years. That's according to a UK intelligence assessment. But in diplomacy, there's always assumptions you make. The president seems to assume, again, that Russia's going to take this territory militarily, therefore Ukraine has to concede. I actually think the opposite assumption is right, and therefore the formula, you put this framework together, the formula on land is freeze where you are now and stop the war, and the war, which you all want. So this is the key issue of territory. It seems to be stuck. I mean, I think the best play here is to support the Ukrainians through the winter, and then in the spring, return to the negotiating table. Putin always thinks winter advantages him. He tries to break his opponents in the winter. This is the 4th winter. It's a difficult winter for Ukraine, but Putin is not going to pick up this land militarily. And in the spring, there might be another opportunity for diplomacy. But right now, it appears to be very stuck, Sarah.
Yeah, and meantime, the war is ongoing and people are suffering through it there. in Ukraine. I do want to ask you about comments that Trump also told Politico when it comes to how he views NATO and whether a message of tough love is being sent to them. Listen.
NATO calls me daddy. I mean, I have a
At VistaPrint, we print signs so people can see your brand up close. But we also print signs so that people can see your business here, see it here, and see it here. So you...
NATO calls me daddy. I mean, I have a lot to say about it. Look, I raised, the GDP from 2% to 5%. The 2% they weren't paying and the 5% they are paying. And they're paying it because when we send things over, NATO pays for it, and I assume they give it to Ukraine. But Europe is being destroyed.
I guess I just need to ask you a couple of questions. What do you think he means by Europe is being destroyed and that
it's the immigration and the socialism that they have?
Well, Sarah, look, America's comparative advantage in the world against countries like China or Russia are allies, or web of alliances, and central to that is Europe and NATO. And yeah, the Europeans are difficult to deal with. It's hard for them to make decisions. Sometimes they act collectively through the EU. That's because of the history of Europe and 2 world wars. And these are arrangements they've put together. I don't think that kind of, unless the president has some aim here, he's trying to get the Europeans to do something specifically. It is tough love. If it's really America kind of walking away from Europe because we don't like where certain countries' domestic politics are heading, I think that's a very dangerous signal, not only for Russia and Putin, but also for Xi Jinping in China. Xi Jinping in China, he will be making his own calculations about Taiwan, which would be a cataclysmic conflict that we have to do everything we possibly can to deter. And he has said he wants his military to be ready by 2027. So we could be heading into a much more dangerous world here, and we're going to need our allies. We're going to need our allies, particularly NATO and the Europeans.
Brett McGurk, you always have great analysis. I really do appreciate you coming on and talking us through all this. Let us now go to Ms. Kira Rudik, who is a member of Ukraine's parliament after hearing all these things. I do want you to listen to Trump's new comments where he talks directly about your president. Here's what he said.
If this deal, if Zelensky rejects this deal, is there a timeline? Is there a point at which you say, okay.
Well, he's going to have to get on the ball and start accepting things. When you're losing, he's losing.
What does it mean to you to hear that during this peace process, the president of the United States is attacking your president and European allies, but not Russia or President Putin?
Hello, Sarah, and thank you so much for having me. It is indeed painful because I'm sure it's not only American people who are watching this. There are people fighting at the front line, risking their life for democracy, for Europe, who are hearing such a harsh thing from President of the United States, one of our strongest.
Why doesn't she talk about the corruption with Zelensky and some of the officials in their government? Maybe the American taxpayers should stop funding Ukraine.
And it's just simply not true. It tries to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it never will. And really our answer is to ask President Trump to start pushing pressure onto Russia and not only on Ukraine. What is disappointing, what is so painful, that since he came into the office, he was only pressuring Ukraine for a peace deal that doesn't seem to actually be working and be a workable thing. However, we only hear promises to start putting pressure on Russia. Ukraine is not a problem here, and there is no other nation than Ukrainian that wants this war to end, because it's our people who are being killed every single day and night at the battlefield and in the peaceful cities. However, if we stop fighting, there will be no Ukraine. If Russia stops fighting, there will be no war and there will be actually peace. And how is it that it's all so reversed? And in the speech, I just really cannot understand and cannot explain it to people in Ukraine. So we just hope that this is just yet one of the tactics that President Trump is known to be using to put pressure on Ukrainian side. However, we do not see any workable deal right now, and we just cannot understand what is expected from Ukraine, especially in this public space.
Yeah, you say that you cannot see, as far as the Ukrainian perspective, cannot see any workable deal right now. I do want to talk about President Zelensky's comments where he said, look, Ukraine has no legal right constitutionally or internationally to give up any territory. Are there any lawmakers, such as yourself in Ukraine, who say they are willing to give up some territory in order to end the war that Russia started?
From my perspective, I do not know anyone who would do that. However, let's reverse this question. What would be the security guarantee? What would be the guarantee that Russia would not attack us again if they are stopped right now, if we agree to any sort of deal right now? So we hear only the questions, what would Ukraine give up, and are there territories that we are willing to give up? But we do not hear the most important thing is, okay, so but what would be a way that we would know that this war would not repeat itself? Because right now, the only way we see is that Russia will continue fighting. They may stop for a year or two, wait for the sanctions to be lifted, regroup, rest, and then attack us again. If we learned something since 2014 when they attacked us for the first time, this is their strategy and it did not change at all. So what we are asking of our allies, like how is this time going to be different? Who or what will make sure that Putin will keep his part of the bargain? And that's the most complicated question that nobody wants to answer right now. And everybody just wants to pressure Ukraine and see if we are ready to match here and there. Well, we did not choose to capitulate in 2022. We are not choosing to capitulate right now. Situation is indeed very hard, but President Trump was wrong saying that we didn't have any cards, and I still believe that we still have some.
I can hear the frustration in your voice as you're hearing these words from the president about your president, about the country. In the meantime, I know that there are people in Ukraine who are experiencing the worst times ever in their lives as the war continues there unabated. Kira Rudik, thank you so much for coming on and discussing this with us.
Win back the territory or end the war. It's up to Ukraine. It's not up to the American taxpayers. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. This will help with your skin, your hair, your nails, your bone density, your cartilage, your joint health, and also your musculature. It's dual purpose. This is a month supply. Take it every day. Make sure you drink it with filtered water, or you can mix it with milk, a smoothie, or soft foods. I take it with soft foods like yogurt or hummus. Myotrol. Myotrol will help to build muscle and to maintain muscle. When you get to age 40, males or females, it's harder to gain muscle and to maintain it. This will help because it will help with the gene expression to build that muscle and to maintain it. It also helps the health of the mitochondria to produce the energy that is needed to maintain muscle. This has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build muscle. Make sure you do some resistance training. Take it every day. Now, if you're an athlete, younger or older, you will benefit also with taking Myotrol, especially if you stack it with Gladiator Barley. You'll build muscle and gain strength for your sport. Good Night Formula has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flowers, so you get the 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep to be able to detoxify your central nervous system, consolidate memory, and to be well rested. When you do this regularly, you will slow down the aging process. Please go to my store, get the Good Night Formula, take it every night, and you'll slow down the aging process and improve your brain function. A great stack, collagen to help with your skin and your bone density and your musculature, Myotrol to help build muscle and to maintain muscle, and Good Night Formula to help with getting into those cycles of REM sleep that you need to consolidate memory and to detoxify your central nervous system. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Now let's continue on as the world turns. I'm noticing that a lot of a lot of the talking heads and podcasts are demonizing Trump because he's detaching from Europe. He's detaching from the neocon agenda, because the neocon agenda is this: stay engaged in Europe and stay engaged in the Middle East. And Trump's saying, well, wait a minute, we need to clean up our own backyard, aka South America. We need to secure the resources that we need for our economy and for our war effort, just in case we need it against China. And we need to bolster up our allies in Asia. I think that's a good policy. But the Euroliners are going to complain about it. I think America's smorgasbord for the Europeans, it's over. He's closed the restaurant for the Europeans, and they don't like it. They don't like it.
Amazon offers hourly employees health care on day one for the whole family.
Mom, go left! Go! And today, Ukraine will pitch its own peace plan to the Trump administration as peace talks stall between Moscow and Kyiv. Ukrainian President Zelensky meeting with European leaders in London yesterday. France, Germany, and the UK vowing more security guarantees, adding that European contributions to President Trump's peace plan. Zelensky refusing to cede any land to Russia as outlined in that plan, a proposal which President Trump said Zelensky did not even read in time. Here's the president yesterday.
I just want to see people stop from being killed. 27,000 soldiers died last month. That's what I want to see stop. We, as you know, we now sell it.
As peace talk, more security guarantees, adding that European contributions to President Trump's peace plan. Zelensky refusing to cede any land to Russia as outlined in that plan, a proposal which President Trump said Zelensky did not even read in time. Here's the president yesterday.
I just want to see people stop from being killed. 27,000 soldiers died last month. That's what I want to see stop. We, as you know, we now sell equipment to NATO at full price, and NATO takes that equipment and probably gives it to Ukraine. I guess they can give it to others too, but for the most part, give it to Ukraine. And they're working with Ukraine in terms of distribution of equipment, missiles, etc. But we aren't spending money. What we are doing is spending time on a humane basis. We want to see if we can stop the killing of 27. It would have never happened. If I were president, this war would have never happened.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte also meeting with Zelensky to coordinate the purchase of U.S. arms by NATO allies under the prioritized Ukraine requirements list. Reuters is reporting the U.S. is pushing Europe to take over the majority of NATO's defense capabilities by 2027. Joining now live from Brussels this morning is U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker. Ambassador, great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. I was struck by the title in the Journal this morning on the story, Europe is scrambling for influence in the U.S.-led peace talks on the war in Ukraine. What can you tell us about the latest here?
Well, good morning, Maria. It's always good to join you. What I can tell you is it's a process, and this war's been going on for 4 years almost. It's not going to stop overnight. What has to happen though is that President Trump needs to be the one that is mediating this dispute, and we just I think have to know that President Trump is the only one that can bring this war to an end by bringing both sides to the table, hammering out a deal. He is the peacemaker in chief, and ultimately it's going to take that involvement by the United States, especially President Trump, to do it. And the shuttle diplomacy that's going on, I think is productive. There are discussions happening, but we need to get not a Venn diagram that overlaps a little bit. We need to get a complete agreement on every point to end this war, and that's taking time. And I'm proud that my friends Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are involved, that they're going back and forth between the Ukrainians and the Russians to see if there is a deal to be had here. The killing does need to end. President Trump is absolutely right.
Yeah, but Ambassador, I mean, look, what about the fact that Ukraine doesn't want to give up any land, and that, of course, was part of the stipulation in the president's peace plan? How is this going to end if Zelensky keeps saying we're not going to cede any land, and Putin keeps saying we're not going to do a deal, and we're going to keep this going until I get more land?
Yeah, I think you need to look at this through the lens of engagement. Zelensky continues to be engaged in discussing what the options are, including security guarantees by the United States and our NATO allies. But also, he's got a domestic audience that he has to message to, as well as, his European folks that are currently paying for a lot of his defense. And so you add all that together, and I think right now the discussions continue until, we're all told that the discussions have ended and they were either productive or not productive. I think that's the moment. But what one leader says, whether it's President Zelensky or Vladimir Putin, oftentimes isn't it exactly what's going on inside the room. And I have a lot of confidence, again, in President Trump as the peacemaker in chief to getting this done, to keeping both sides engaged and hammering out a deal that finally ends the killing. Because losing 25 to 30,000 people, both on the battlefield and in Ukraine, I think it's just we need this war to end.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Look, the New York Post is out with an op-ed this morning, and it's titled this: "Impotent Europeans can only fume as Trump rightly sidelines them from the Ukraine deal." They call President Trump's peace plan, quote, "a triple win for the Europeans," but they're acting like bad losers. The Europeans would rather risk war on Putin's terms than peace on Trump's. Your reaction to this op-ed, impotent Europeans, is what they're calling them. And by the way, we know that Europe is holding really the dominance and the influence over the $244 billion in frozen Russian assets. They're divided on whether or not to release that money to fund Ukraine. I know you've talked a lot about using the dividends on that money to rebuild Ukraine, but what about the $244 billion? I mean, why is that still in question?
Yeah, well, I think that my sense of talking to our allies that are going to make that decision in the coming weeks, I think they feel that they have a pretty good path forward to get that done. But again, the United States has not expressed a position, and I think President Trump is just watching it. He knows that this war needs to end. What we don't need is to fund more war. What we need is to have both sides come to the table and resolve this. I was at the Doha Forum over the weekend in Qatar, and one of the things I said was that, you don't go into a butcher shop halfway through the sausage being made and criticize how he's making the sausage, especially if you plan on, enjoying it later. You just let the process work. And I think that's what's happening here. We have a lot of people that are standing on the sidelines on the outside criticizing either the process or the participants, and this is where the United States again is the only country, and President Trump is the president that can get this done, and he's the only person that can get this done. And so I think right now we just need to sort of ignore the noise and focus on productive talks between the participants in this war to get it resolved. It's hard, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do the hard things that can bring peace.
All right, we will be watching all of that. Matt Whitaker, great to talk with you as always. Thank you, sir.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. This has 68 nutrients, very comprehensive compound profile shown on the screen here. You can read the label on my website. This will target multiple systems: brain function, musculature, energy levels, increase your metabolism, and cardiovascular health. Super important. It also helps to control your A1C levels. You can stack this with the barley that I have, either heirloom barley or gladiator barley, and you can stack it with other supplements like C60. Now, take this every day. This is a month's supply. It's a powder. You mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even with milk. I normally put it with hummus. You can also use it with yogurt or applesauce. It's a great supplement to take every day. You will notice the effects of this within 72 hours. You're going to have a steady burn of energy throughout the whole day, and you're going to have more vitality. You're going to be more energetic. And when you take this regularly, you're going to slow down the aging process. improve your immune system, improve your endocrine system, improve your brain function, improve your cellular metabolism. You're going to lose weight. You're going to also just get healthier. Please go to my store, take this. This is super important to get. Also, get the C60. C60 you can get in an MCT coconut oil, avocado oil, and extra virgin olive oil. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce to get the higher ounce configuration. Take a teaspoon a day every day. Now, when you do that, you're going to soak up free radicals in your cells, in your tissues, even in your vascular system and neurons. And it's going to improve the health of the mitochondria, allow you to have more energy. By healthier mitochondria, you'll have more ATP. Cells will perform better. It'll reduce inflammation, reduce stress in that tissue, and the tissues will perform better. That means that your immune system, your endocrine system, and your organ systems will perform better. Your neurons will be healthier. You'll have better brain function. You'll be thinking faster. You'll have better memory. In addition, at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. Because when you soak up free radicals in your blood, you're reducing the concentrations of oxidized LDL. And oxidized LDL is the beginning cascade for plaque buildup. So you want to stop that. You do that by soaking up free radicals. So take C60, a teaspoon a day, every day. Within 2 months, you're going to start feeling the effects. You're going to have more energy, your immune system will be better, your endocrine system will be better. Even your basal layer of your skin, you'll start to notice that your skin's improving. Because when you're improving the health of the basal layer, new skin cells will be generated from that basal layer and you'll have better skin. This stacks really well with Boomer Boost and also resveratrol, because resveratrol also helps with the basal layer. Now, C60, you take a teaspoon a day, every day. You do that for a year, and you do a compare on a before and after comparison. When you take C60 for a year, you're going to notice that you look younger. So please, take my advice. This is super powerful. It's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. You can't take enough vitamin C to soak up the free radicals that one molecule of this does. All right, so please, pay attention. It's a very potent antioxidant, and it will slow down the aging process and improve your immune system and your endocrine system. One molecule of C60 is 1,000 times stronger than a molecule of vitamin C. Just take a teaspoon a day. Super simple. And you can stack it with resveratrol or the Boomer Boost. And if you've been paying attention to my anti-aging protocol and some of the videos I've been doing, the foundation is the multivitamin and the probiotic. The first pillar is the Max 30 Fiber Cleanse to boost up your immune system. Second pillar is C60 to soak up free radicals. The third pillar, turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans to improve your immune system and help with your cardiovascular system. And Boomer Boost is the fourth pillar of the protocol to rev up your metabolism and your energy levels. And you get other benefits like helps with brain function and cardiovascular health and musculature. If you follow that protocol, you are really going to give the nutrients that your body needs to slow down the aging process and to get healthy and to boost up that immune system. I've been doing this for a very long time. So please go to my store, use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All righty. All righty. Let's listen into Jamie Dimon.
They say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Well, they are correct.
President Trump kicks off his affordability tour in Pennsylvania tomorrow. Top advisors say the president will focus on wages, housing costs, and inflation. 3 issues still dominating kitchen table conversations nationwide.
Welcome to the Big Money Show. I'm Brian Brender, along with my co-host Jackie DeAngelis, Taylor Riggs, David McDowell, and with us for the hour, Strategas partner and chief market strategist Chris Barone. Welcome, sir. Good to see you.
Great to be here, Brian.
Well, JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon weighing in on the affordability debate, telling Maria Bartiromo that the economy is far from disaster, but that inflation isn't going away.
In the short run, it looks like the American consumer is doing fine, is chugging along, companies are making profits, stock markets are high, and that could easily continue. There are a little small negatives, like jobs are weakening, but just a little bit. Inflation is there and maybe not going down.
And the Federal Reserve is set for a big interest rate decision on Wednesday, one that could boost or squash the Santa Claus rally. Stocks are nearing all-time highs. Chris, I go your way. You've got your finger on the pulse of the North Pole and Santa Claus rallies and all these things. I know you're going to tell me what the markets are telling us about what next year looks like, inflation, growth. What are they saying?
Well, I think if anything, when you look out to 26, the market seems to be anticipatory of a better economy here. I mean, everything we look at suggests real economy is actually inflecting. Consumer discretionary has turned up pretty meaningfully over the last 6 or 8 weeks. Regional banks have broken out. Transport's all acting better. I think it's important that bond yields have not gone down a lot from here. If you go back to April, that 360, 375 level on 10s was kind of really the line in the sand between when the economy really weakened. So I'm actually comforted that yields have held kind of this 415, 420 range. So everywhere we look, whether it's commodities, whether it's rates, whether it's consumer, whether it's industrials, I think the message is of an economy that's actually inflecting to the good ahead of 26.
Okay, so it is a lot about messaging right now, Jackie. The president's going out to do the big, starting out in Pennsylvania, is going to go do the big speeches across the country. They're saying that Democrats are honing their message on affordability. Do you think the Democrat message on affordability is really salient with the people that President Trump's going to be talking to out there?
No, not at all. The people President Trump is talking to are walking around saying the average for a gas price, the national average now is now under $3, and they appreciate that. They're also waiting patiently to see the benefits of the big, beautiful bill next year, because Bessent made his rounds this Sunday, and he said that affordability has two components. There's inflation and there's real incomes. Real incomes are up about 1%. We've been discussing that on this show. The problem with this is the inflation aspect of it. Nobody really cares about the 3% where we are right now. I mean, certainly you don't want to see that go higher. But remember, under the Biden administration, it went up to 9.1%, and those prices never came down. So prices are a kitchen table issue, and they continue to be, and people have been discussing them for 5 years now. So what President Trump is trying to do is spur growth in the economy, and through this bill, put some of that money back into people's hands. It might not be coming directly as wage growth translates, as we see it in the Labor Department reports. But remember, you're talking about no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. That's part of people's wages, and they will see a benefit of it. Scott Bessent did say that as well. He said the best way to address the affordability crisis is to give Americans more money in their pockets, which this bill has done. I'm hopeful that that will make a difference for people, but also recall, not to take a victory lap for our show, we kept running around and saying, when you jack inflation up to 9% and prices go up, sure, some things that trade like commodities may come down, and I'm talking about a food item here or there, but not everything is going to come down. And when those wages spiked under Biden and minimum wage went up, now you have to keep up with that pace, and wages are the most important thing.
I'm not opposed to victory laps because I don't get to take many.
Well, I just
so when I got one,
all of us.
I'm taking it.
Nobody believes that. You look like a Ken doll. Nobody believes that.
You know, Ken actually didn't take many victory laps.
He didn't. He was modest.
Didn't you see him in the Pixar movies?
I meant that as a compliment.
He lived in Barbie's shadow.
He did. Indeed. Yes, a moment of silence for Ken. Okay, Dagan, I'm coming your way. You go wherever you want. But this story did catch my eye on the president saying he wants to kind of do a crackdown on grocery prices, sort of looking for collusion. I think he's focusing more on foreign firms, maybe. I don't know. I'm curious what you think about that and all the aforementioned things we've discussed.
It's very Biden-esque, isn't it? Let's focus on my allegations of Does it smell like collusion? Does it look like a semi-monopoly? Since we started off with a little Jamie Dimon quote, let's talk about the banking industry. If President Trump wants to throw the verbal hammer down on some people, these banks are in your checking account, in your savings account, you earn nothing. And they earn 4 to 7% off of your money. And say, for example, condominium complex, condominium building in South Florida, as one example. You have millions of dollars in reserves that you, by law, have to keep set aside in a bank account. That condo earns nothing on those reserves at Chase, JP Morgan. However, then they turn around and make loans to the condo owners to pay for the special assessments, and they're earning 7% on those loans. That's JP Morgan. And every bank gives you the same raw deal.
My energy bill dropped from $150 to $50 by doing this. My friends laughed at me when I spent $49 on a power saver device that could cut my energy.
Raw deal. Does that smell like collusion? It certainly has the whiff of it, does it not? So they, again, give you nothing and make a fortune off of your nothing, in essence. So you're getting robbed by all of these banks. Let's look at them, President Trump, rather than the grocery stores.
You'll get nothing in like, is that Judge Schmales? Is that Caddyshack?
To his grandson.
That's right. The Judge Schmales approach to banking. Taylor, I'm coming your way. I saw this headline. The year of America's cranky consumer.
Ooh, yeah.
So are consumers cranky, or are they really justifiably upset about a big affordability crisis? How much of this is political? How much of this is economic reality?
So we learned in the last administration, feelings are real. I'm not going to tell you that you don't feel a certain way. If you feel like things are unaffordable, you have to listen to that. And I think in New York City, as we all sit here, we learned that you have to listen to that because then people like Mom Johnny get elected if you don't listen, right? So it's important in that way. But from an economic perspective, from a market perspective, I would say some of the best bull markets, some of the best rallies we have, climb that wall of fear, climb that cranky consumer. So blink and you miss it. We're almost within about 1% from record highs. And what was interesting is pretty much from April to October, it was a straight line up in equity markets. But consumers and surveys weren't overly bullish. You didn't have extreme greed. You didn't have extreme bullishness. There was still sort of that bearish sentiment out there. Evercore is one of those firms saying that leads us to think the rally continues because you're not at these extreme levels. Even though at a record high, you typically would start to feel that extreme levels. Another note this morning, Yardeni, a veteran on Wall Street, is finally actually saying they want to go underweight the Mag 7 and just do a market weight instead of an overweight. So taking that down a little bit because the rally has been so much. So again, I think we can all feel frustrated by the affordability issues, but you can't necessarily translate that into betting against the equity market. We could also bring this all full circle and say, maybe the equity market's one of the best ways to grow ourselves into the unaffordability, more of affordability, if you know what I mean.
You want to afford more things, get in equity markets?
Totally.
Yeah.
Now, Chris mentioned this. So consumer discretionary stocks were down 11% earlier this fall, and now they have rallied back 7% in just 2 weeks.
Yeah, they've had a pretty impressive move the last 6, 7, 8 weeks. Ironically, when you look at all the consumer sentiment surveys, whether it's University of Michigan or Conference Board, you actually want to be buying discretionary stocks when those surveys are as bad as they currently are. So we're in like the bottom decile right now if you look at consumer sentiment. That's generally where excess performance has come from the discretionary sector, as counterintuitive as that sounds. You know, I think one thing that professional economists or strategists get wrong is when we talk about inflation, which is a rate of change, we forget that most Americans don't think of life in terms of rate of change. They think of life in terms of level. I think, Jackie, you certainly touched on this. So I want to give you some data that I think is important. Retail gasoline, 5-year low, $2.95. That's the average around the country, 5-year low. The median is actually $2.85. So why is the median less than the average? Because California. California, the average is still $4.50 a gallon. If you look at blue states versus red states, blue state average, $3.25. Red state average, $2.75. So there is this wide disparity between what the price at the pump is around the country, and it really breaks on red state, blue states.
Can I also just add one thing quick? The wealth effect that we've seen over the course of the last 3 years now, because we're almost at the end of this year, and there were gangbuster 2 years for the stock market going into Trump's presidency. That is real. When you walk around this city in particular, or malls in New Jersey, both of which I've done, people are out and they are spending. You can't get a reservation next Saturday night at a restaurant. I had to call 20 places to try to be able to find a table that wasn't at 10:30. People are out spending, and they do feel good about the gains they've received in the stock market. And that is where the disconnect is with respect to, prices, the cranky consumer, the overall sentiment. But then yet the companies are still saying, I believe it was Jamie Dimon said, companies are still saying people are spending and things are robust and we're poised to continue to go higher. That's hard for people to get their head around, but that is very, very real.
Yeah. But that's one of the reasons that Zoran Mondani got elected. And with respect, one of our viewers emailed me last week about the watch check.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I saw that.
And he said the Coca watch, the $5 million watch. Remember your concerns prior to the New York City mayoral election. This is why Mondani got elected, and our country has the beginnings of socialism or communism worship.
Yeah.
It's just you're talking about something that is just completely out of the reach of our viewers and Americans. And it's fine to, praise people who have made it and encourage capitalism and business formation. But when people are struggling,
I would just add to that.
There's a balance.
And
I'm talking about one of our viewers, Citizen.
Yeah, no, I know. And the wealth gap that you're talking about, that they're highlighting there, is real also. I would just say that wealth gap hasn't gotten wider in the last year alone. That wealth gap got significantly wider and more polarized under Joe Biden, who said that he was going to work for the middle class and try to make things better for them. Actually, he made things worse for them. And here we are. So when we get to the socialism conversation and who's going to fix the problem and what are the right answers and solutions, you don't go to the person who broke your arm and then say, oh, can you fix it for me?
Yeah. And for everybody who can't do the big watches, remember, I've got 0 on it all. So
it wasn't it was the Coppola watch.
Coppola watch. I definitely don't have one of those as well. Taylor, I want you to tell me about Warner Brothers, because there's a lot going on.
Holy smokes, you guys. The fight just got, what's the word? Thicker, the plot thickened, the fight got nastier. Oh my goodness. So Warner Brothers Discovery higher because Paramount's coming with pretty much a hostile bid. They went straight to shareholders and said, we are offering you now about $30 a share, and this is for the entire company, not the separated company, the way that Netflix did when they come in at $27.75 with a cash and stock offer. So again, the plot thickens here a little bit. There's a Trump angle here. There's a fundamental issue here. There's a debt issue here. You guys jump in way.
Can I comment on it?
Yeah.
Either way, David Zaslav is going to become a billionaire, so we know that. If they go the route with Netflix and they don't get approval, there's a massive breakup fee. So, deal breakage fee. So they're kind of banking on that. I actually think this hostile bid will move forward. I think it's better value for the shareholders. I think it's better to take all the assets and not start spinning things off here and there in that way and face the regulatory hurdles. I also think when it comes to this deal, I believe it was in a note that I saw, it was the Ellison family and Redbird Capital are backstopping it, which is very substantial. So let's see how it shakes out, but time is of the essence here.
watch the stock because it's close to being in the red for the year. It's up a little bit, but it was like gangbusters and it's fallen off a cliff. And if they're selling it that hard, and Netflix sent out an email to all the customers over the weekend saying, welcoming HBO, welcoming Warner Brothers into our firm, HBO. I'm like,
putting the
what
they're getting right on that.
Because that means that it's getting ready to jack your prices. They're gonna jack your price to pay for this monstrosity that it's trying to buy.
There were rumors of the hostile bid, I believe, on Friday. It was either as early as Thursday, but definitely on Friday. So I was expecting this to come in today. That is very aggressive of them to send that email out to say we got this.
Yeah, nothing's changing today. Mm-hmm.
Wait for tomorrow.
I already canceled Netflix. Can't afford it.
Oh my gosh.
Affordability.
They're not telling you the truth.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotic and the complete multivitamin. The complete multivitamin has the multivitamins for the cofactors you need for proper enzymatic activity, so your cells perform properly. It's part of my anti-aging protocol. It's easy to digest. Get this multivitamin. It's very high quality. And again, it's easy to digest. And get the probiotic. Probiotics are super important for your gut biome, bring down inflammation at the gut level, helps with digestion, absorbing your nutrients. Also, a good gut biome is going to help with your skin, your brain function, and your cellular metabolism. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the probiotic and the multivitamin, very high quality, and it's the foundation of my anti-aging protocol. You take this, that's the foundation, then take Max 35 or Cleanse for the first pillar to boost up that immune system, C60, the second pillar, to soak up free radicals, the third pillar, turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans to boost up that immune system, and the fourth pillar, Boomer Boost. You take that, it's very powerful to slow down the aging process. All righty. Let's take a look at what else is going on. Oh, this is interesting. LA port sees fewer imports from China due to tariffs. All right, let's listen into Bloomberg here for a second.
For the Dow Jones Industrial Average since our last update, right now looking at the Dow, Merck, JP Morgan Chase leading the index lower. Right now we've got the Dow down 82, drop there of 0.2%. Sell-off happening in the past couple of minutes. S&P 500 index up 5, that is a gain of about 0.1%. But the Nasdaq Composite Index holding on to a gain of 48 points, up now by about 0.2%. The 10-year currently yielding 4.17% ahead of tomorrow's Fed decision. The 2-year, 3.60%. Gold is up 0.4%, 42.08 the ounce. Silver surging 3.6%, 60.24 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude oil down 1.2%, 58.18 a barrel on WTI. Bitcoin at 93,793. Bitcoin up now by 2.7%. Markets, meanwhile, are looking to Washington as we head into the new year. Jonathan Pingle is chief U.S. economist at UBS Securities, and he was the guest this morning on Bloomberg Surveillance.
When we're constructing our forecast, I would, under most circumstances, continue to have the economy slow here. But it's really hard ahead of the fiscal stimulus we think we're going to get from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act next year. I mean, we're going to have a bumper tax refund season that's going to be spread across the income distribution. It's a little hard to get overly bearish knowing I'm going to get sort of the slug of $50 billion in additional refund checks.
Jonathan Pingle of UBS interviewed this morning on surveillance. Uber introducing a way for some people to use its ride-hailing service without the company's signature app. The rideshare giant plans to install physical kiosks in places like airports, starting with LaGuardia in New York. The idea,
You walk up to a human, they'll help you order and Uber. Recapping, stocks higher. S&P right now up 5, up 0.1%, but we are seeing the Dow Industrials down 0.1%. For on-demand news, 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News now wherever you get your podcast. Back, we go to Washington. Once again, here's your host, Joe Matthew.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the ashwagandha root. This will help to control your cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. When you do that, you're reducing inflammation. That's going to help your immune system. And by bringing down inflammation at the vascular level, you're helping your cardiovascular system. Take ashwagandha root every day. Drink it with filtered water.
My take. Democrats have a very different approach to this than many Republicans. And of course, while President Trump doesn't want anything to do with any of this, he says just send the money directly to people. Let them buy their own. So yeah, we're still chewing on Obamacare. This is the same debate that led to the government shutdown. And the Thursday promised vote by John Thune is what brought Democrats back to the table to vote for the CR to reopen. So we're still experiencing the fallout here of the longest shutdown in government history, knowing that millions of Americans have already received notices saying that their premiums are going up. Donald Trump, in this long-ranging interview with Politico, was asked about this. Here's what he said.
Will you tell Congress to extend those Obamacare subsidies while you
I don't know. I'm going to have to
deal?
say, I'd like to get better health care. I'd like to have people buy their own health care, get much better health care. And what I want to do, for example, I want to give the money to the people, not to the insurance
So right now,
companies.
people.
Give the money to the people, but of course then the people would give it to the insurance companies, right? We're trying to figure this out with the help of our panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano are with us. Rick is, of course, partner at Stone Court Capital, our Republican strategist. Jeannie, our Democratic analyst and democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Rick, you've been knocking around the healthcare debate for a long time. Everybody remembers the thumbs down from your former boss, John McCain, and it's something 15 years in the making. Republicans haven't really gotten their arms around in terms of a replacement or a realistic set of reforms. What's about to happen this week? Will Republicans decide on a plan, or do they just let this go by?
Yeah, you point out it's incredibly difficult for Republicans to do anything that looks like they are enshrining ACA. And when John McCain went down to the well of the Senate, when skinny reform was on the vote and put his thumb down, representing the vote that killed that reform, he was the lone guy who could make that happen. There are no lone guys anymore in the United States Senate. There's no one there who's actually going to want to take the hard trek down to saying, oh, we should have ACA subsidies. And so the fact that, in the Susan Collins bill in the Senate, they actually have some of those subsidies to be done, reformed, but actually continued is an act of political courage. Can that pass? Probably not.
Jeannie, yesterday you were suggesting that a Democratic plan cannot pass the Senate. Do we know exactly what that plan is? Is this a 3-year extension? What are you voting on Thursday?
Yeah, that's what it looks like, is the 3-year extension. And by the way, Joe, you cut off the best part of that interview when she said, Dasha Burns, when Dasha Burns started raising Christmas gifts, and Donald Trump was like, don't be dramatic. Not substantive, but a lot of fun. The Democrats, it looks like it's going to be the 3-year extension. It doesn't have much hope to move through, although, on what Rick mentioned in terms of what we're seeing out of Susan Collins and Bernie Moreno, I think it's really important to note that Bernie Moreno is no sort of moderate Republican. This is a young MAGA conservative, and it is notable that he is joining forces with Susan Collins, and they are putting forward this idea. And again, it doesn't have the votes either, but it just shows you how the concern has rippled through the Republican side if the Republicans don't take a vote, or if they do take a vote and have nothing to meet Democrats with. I mean, there is a lot of fear on the Republican side as to what this all is going to mean if they can't get something through. And we heard the president say yesterday in that interview, these sort of very sort of vague ideas. You've got 2 weeks to go. If you're not going to convince GOP members now, it's done. So it doesn't look like we are anywhere closer today than we were a month or two ago.
I'm compelled by what's happening in the House here, Rick. I don't know your thoughts on this, but it's actually bipartisan. Brian Fitzpatrick leading the effort, Don Bacon, Bresnahan, Malliotakis, the R's. You've got Jared Golden, Tom Suozzi, Don Davis, and Glusenkamp Perez, the D's, here from a lot of different areas of the country. A 2-year extension, crackdown on pharmacy benefit managers. Isn't this the kind of thing that could pass?
I really think it's the kind of thing that should pass the House of Representatives. It's kind of an example of the gang of in the Senate in the old days, right? You get, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats. They craft a bipartisan plan and then dare everybody else to vote against it. And it really echoes what Jeannie was saying. Republicans are in a bit of a panic. We don't have a singular proposal, right? All the talk we've had for almost a decade of opposing ACA has not yet resulted in a Republican plan to replace it. You remember repeal and replace? Yes. Well, we've been talking about that for a decade, and we haven't figured out what to replace it with. And so the fact that we're now posed with this challenge, and there is a real deadline at the end of this year that will have a really negative impact if it's missed, with individuals, 20 million people, maybe 40, who are going to have extremely high premiums, is what's got Republicans really willing to walk the plank now. So, look, this is a classic case where the House could actually lead the Senate. If they could pass that kind of a bipartisan measure, then there'll be the onus on the Senate Republicans to come together with a number of, all they need is a half a dozen Democrats to pass a bill.
Did Republicans make a mistake by not engaging Democrats when the shutdown began on the issue of health?
It's hard to talk tactics at this point because it was all fused with this shutdown politics. Right. And the worst thing was combining healthcare and shutdown. They really should have been divorced and we wouldn't be in this mess. Both would have been dealt with on their own. And now we're right back in the same pot. And so I think the lesson for history is don't put too much on the plate when you have a looming government shutdown because it really makes everything else harder, not easier.
Yeah, but do you think if the government had not shut down, Jeannie, that Republicans would have engaged Democrats, that we might not be having this conversation right now on healthcare specifically?
No, and you know why? It's something you and Rick were just talking about. It's the fact that we are 15 plus years on and they have never been comfortable with this issue. And what's astonishing is not just that we're almost 2 decades in and they have no answer on healthcare, but that the answer that the Republicans had is Obamacare. That was Mitt Romney's bill. That is what passed. And so they have been flummoxed ever since Barack Obama adopted that as his own and it was pushed through, and they've never had a coherent answer since. To your earlier point about deja vu all over again, which is where we are. And the danger for Republicans is very real here, but it's also a danger for all of us. The millions of people who are going to be paying more in healthcare. The fact that if we don't get a vote before the end of the year, it increases the chances we could see another government shutdown. And also, what about the president's one big beautiful bill? They were trying to do those refunds. Now, if people are paying more for healthcare, all of that is a wash. So this is a big mess for Congress. And I think it underscores what we've been seeing in this Congress. There is very little leadership. The bill you're just talking about in the House with this bipartisan group, this is a rank and file bill that they may have to put forward on a discharge petition. Where is the leadership in the House and where is the leadership in the Senate? They've got to come forward. But of course, their leader is Donald Trump, and we heard he's really nowhere on this either last night.
I actually thought of you when I heard this discharge petition idea. Is this really where we are?
It could be. I think it's like everything else, right? Sanctions in Ukraine, discharge petition. Yeah, but I would remind Jeannie, we're still waiting for the Democratic alternative that was supposed to be presented like a long time ago, and now we're down to like a vote tomorrow and no one's seen the paper. So it's leadership on both parties, right? They have sort of abdicated their will on trying to formulate the plans that they could inform and sell and then vote on. And none of that's happening. And thank goodness for the rank and file in both the Senate and the House, because they see their job is not done yet until this is fixed, and they're trying to fix it.
Jeannie, new polling on this matter comes from Morning Consult.
It's a pool of about 2,200 people for what it's worth. Registered voters, 58% say Congress should extend the subsidies. 24% say let them expire. You know, there are a lot of folks out there, a lot of political analysts and people here in the political class in Washington who think Democrats don't want there to be a solution. Because if we go over the cliff, you take back the House. What would you say to them?
I think that strategically, that is a real concern. You know, we all hope that that is not the fact, but politically, this has been a helpful issue for Democrats for decades, and it continues to be. You know, you look at that poll and those numbers are pretty startling. There's no really good answers here because, of course, the subsidies themselves never made much sense either. But now your back is up against the wall. They probably should be extended. But let's not forget, my view has always been if Republicans or Democrats rather really believe in these subsidies, they should never be temporary. You should tell us the cost. We should pay for them, and they should not be a temporary fix. But that's how our government has been working for a long time on both sides. So now our back is up against the wall. We probably need an extension and then hope they figure it out long term. But it's Congress, so there's not a lot of hope in that.
Revolutionary idea. What do you think of this language we're hearing from Donald Trump? Just saying, you know, it sounds good to some people. Just send people the money, but then they're just going to go give it to the insurance company with less leverage, wouldn't they? Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because sure, you want to give people the power to control their own fate, and that's a little bit of the bill that is making its way through the Senate by Cassidy. Yes. You know, give $1,000 to people under the age of 49 and let them go buy the bronze plan, make them eligible for the bronze plan and the ACA and catastrophic, and they can go pick up $1,000 worth of insurance somewhere else. The problem is HCA accounts do not allow you to use that money to buy insurance. That was the whole idea of an HCA, is that you use it not to buy insurance, to actually go and pay for healthcare directly. A lot of people don't want the hassle of doing that. They want an insurance plan that covers everything. And so that's part of the problem in the debate that's happening right now in the Senate is how do we just make it easier? We've created a plan that is so confusing to people that they'll never figure out the solution is a good one if we give it to them. So Jeannie, just a remaining moment. What would happen under Donald Trump's proposal? You send everybody money so that they can go to the insurance company. Don't the premiums go up in that case anyway because they don't have the benefit of economies of scale?
I think so, and I also see our future, Joe, and we would be on the phone, I guess, individually battling with insurance companies. It's the worst case scenario. I don't see it as a solution. So, you know, please, God, no. I think Rick is right when he says that people really want a plan that allows them to get health care and not have to be battling with insurance companies individually in this way.
Yeah. So I think we're still chewing on this. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, our great panel, will be back in our second hour as we welcome our global television audience to the conversation. I hope you'll stay with us as well here on Bloomberg Radio, on satellite radio channel 121.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the turmeric. This will bring down inflammation. It lowers pro-inflammatory cytokines, super important for your immune system, and soaks up free radicals. And lastly, get the lignans. It'll help your immune system and endocrine system, bring down inflammation and soak up free radicals. You can stack it with the turmeric and the ashwagandha to supercharge the stack to help with your immune system. That's the end of my broadcast. Thank you for listening. Please go to my store, get the supplements, get healthy. Use discount 5 to save some money. And if you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. You can save even more money by using discount 5 and buying some of the anti-aging boxes or longevity boxes that I have. Those are curated supplement stacks to target certain systems. So thank you for listening and have a nice day.